In one moment, 15 years of marriage crystallized into a single number: 0. Our joint savings account, once holding our dreams of retirement and security, now held nothing but betrayal. That sickening free-fall sensation in my chest told me everything I needed to know. My husband hadn't just stolen our money, he'd stolen our future. I'm Samantha Reed, and I just spent 12 years building a life with a man who emptied our future into another woman's hands. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Now I'm sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of cold coffee, staring at the evidence that my husband, Daniel, isn't just having an affair. He's financing it with everything we've worked for. My hands trembled as I scrolled through our account, history on my laptop. The withdrawals had started small, $5,000 here, $8,000 there, amounts that would raise questions but not immediate alarms. Then came the big one, $215,000 transferred 3 days ago while I was at my sister's in Portland. Our entire emergency fund, our renovation money, most of our retirement savings, gone in a single transaction. I reached for my phone, nearly knocking over my coffee. Daniel wasn't answering, of course. It went straight to voicemail, his cheerful greeting now sounding like mockery. "Daniel, it's me. We need to talk about the money that's missing from our account. Call me back immediately." My voice sounded alien to my own ears, too calm, too controlled for the hurricane raging inside me. The kitchen that Daniel and I had painstakingly renovated together last year now felt like a stage set. Beautiful, but hollow. A backdrop for a life that apparently wasn't real. The subway tile backsplash we'd argued over. The farmhouse sink he'd insisted was worth the extra expense. The custom cabinets I'd secretly thought were too extravagant, but had agreed to because he'd been so excited. All paid for with my income as much as his. The evidence had been there, I realized, as I rummaged through our home office, pulling out bank statements I'd neglected to review. Daniel volunteering to handle our finances 2 years ago. His increased secrecy about his phone. The late nights at work that I'd trusted were legitimate, because Daniel was an architect, and deadlines were unpredictable. The weekend golf trips with old college buddies that had become more frequent. My phone buzzed. Not Daniel, but my colleague Teresa. "Hey, how was the sister visit?" she asked, her voice bright. "Daniel emptied our savings account," I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "Over $215,000, it's all gone." "What? Samantha, are you serious? Have you called the bank?" Could it be fraud? It's not fraud, at least not the kind the bank would care about. I pulled up our credit card statement on my laptop as we spoke. He's been making reservations at restaurants I've never been to, buying gifts I've never received. There's a charge here for jewelry from Tiffany's last month, our anniversary. He gave me a cookbook. Jesus, Sam, do you think he's having an affair? Yes. Using our money to fund it? Apparently. Call the bank right now, Teresa urged. They might be able to reverse the transfer if it's recent enough. I already did. The money was moved to an account in his name only, then withdrawn in certified checks. They can't touch it without his permission or a court order. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at our perfectly manicured lawn in our perfectly respectable neighborhood. The Mitchells across the street were walking their golden retriever. Mrs. Patel next door was tending to her roses. Everything looked so normal, while my life was imploding. "I need to figure out where he is," I said, more to myself than to Teresa. "I'll come over," she offered immediately. "No, I need to handle this myself first. I'll call you back." I hung up and started searching through Daniel's desk drawers, looking for anything that might tell me where he was, who he was with. The drawers were unusually neat. Another red flag I'd missed. Daniel had never been organized before taking over our finances. In the bottom drawer, tucked beneath hanging folders, I found a real estate brochure for Oakwood Hills, an exclusive new development across town. Several properties were circled, including a sprawling contemporary home listed at just under $1. $2 million. Across the top, in Daniel's handwriting, potential options for N. N, not S for Samantha. N. I flipped through the brochure and a business card fell out. Natalie Winters, real estate investment specialist. On the back, in flowing handwriting, can't wait to see you in our new place. Love you always, Nat. My knees gave out, and I sank to the floor of the office. Natalie. I knew her, or knew of her. She'd been at our firm's holiday party last year. Daniel had introduced her as a consultant on one of his projects. She was younger than me, of course. Stylish in that effortless way I could never quite manage between my 60-hour work weeks as a corporate attorney. My phone buzzed with a text. Daniel. Working late tonight, don't wait up. Working late, with Natalie apparently. In the new house he'd bought her with our money, our future. I texted back, "Where's our money, Daniel?" 3 dots appeared. Disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "What are you talking about?" "The two $15,000 you transferred out of our savings. The smaller amounts before that. Where is it?" No response. Then, after 5 long minutes, "We need to talk about this in person, not now." "You're right. We do. I'm coming to your office." "I'm not at the office. I'm at a client meeting." Liar. I remembered something and rushed to our bedroom, opening my laptop again. 3 years ago, I'd given Daniel a premium smartwatch for his birthday. It had a feature I'd enabled, but he didn't know about. Location sharing, linked to my account in case he ever lost it. I clicked on the app, holding my breath. If he'd figured it out, if he'd disabled it. The map loaded. A pulsing blue dot appeared. Not at his downtown office, not at any client site I knew of. The address was in Oakwood Hills. I grabbed my purse and car keys, then paused. Racing over there in my current state would be satisfying, but possibly unwise. I needed more information, more evidence. I returned to the office and systematically went through everything. Filing cabinets, desk drawers, even the bookshelf. In the process, I discovered more brochures for Oakwood Hills, printouts of furniture that cost more than my first car, and finally, a manila folder labeled Property Investment. Inside was a purchase agreement for 1420 Willow Creek Drive in T-Sitin, Oakwood Hills. Purchase price, $1, $15 million. Purchaser, Daniel Reed. Down payment, $230,000. Our money, our entire savings, used as a down payment on a house for his girlfriend. I took photos of everything with my phone, then carefully replaced the documents exactly as I'd found them. My lawyer brain was finally kicking in through the emotional fog. Document everything. Create a paper trail. Don't tip your hand too early. As I was returning the last folder, something caught my eye. A statement from Westlake Community Bank. A bank we didn't use. I opened it to find an account in Daniel's name only with a balance of just over $40,000. How long had he been siphoning? Money into a separate account? I checked the transaction history. Regular deposits over the past 18 months, small enough not to be missed from our joint account, but adding up over time. Money that should have been part of our shared life, secretly diverted to fund his escape plan. My phone buzzed again. Daniel. I'll be home late. We can talk tomorrow. Tomorrow. When he thought he'd have time to craft his lies, to create a plausible explanation for the missing money. Maybe he'd claim it was a business investment gone wrong. Maybe he'd say he was planning a surprise. But I had seen the truth in black and white. Our new place, Natalie had written. Our money, our dreams, our future, all redirected to build a life with another woman. I texted back just 2 words. Okay, tomorrow. But as I sat surrounded by the evidence of my husband's betrayal, I knew tomorrow would bring something very different than what Daniel expected. Because what he didn't know, what I had never told him, was that I had always kept a separate account of my own. Not for an affair, not for escape, but because my grandmother had taught me long ago. A smart woman always has resources of her own. And those resources were about to become very, very important. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I closed the folders, wiped away my tears, and opened my laptop to check another account. One Daniel knew nothing about. It was time to make some plans of my own. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay in our king-sized bed, the one Daniel and I had picked out together when we bought this house, and stared at the ceiling, my mind racing through calculations, scenarios, and plans. By the time the first light of dawn filtered through, our bedroom curtains I had moved beyond shock and into a cold, clear determination. You might want to consider protecting your remaining assets. I'm already on it, I assured him. One more question. Has my husband accessed our safe deposit box recently? Harold checked his system again. Yes, 3 times in the past month. Most recently yesterday afternoon. Yesterday? While I was discovering our emptied savings account, Daniel had been removing items from our safe deposit box. I thought of what was stored there. Jewelry, some of which had been my grandmother's. Important documents. The deed to a small vacation property in Maine that had been in my family for generations. I'd like to access it now, I said. 15 minutes later, I was staring at a half-empty safe deposit box. My grandmother's sapphire earrings were gone. So was the deed to the Maine property. I'd like to remove everything remaining and close this box, I told the attendant. Back in Harold's office, I made several quick decisions. First, I moved what little remained in our joint checking account to a new account in my name only. Second, I requested that any new activity on any joint account be flagged and that I be notified immediately. And third, I asked about their requirements for a mortgage loan. For someone with your income and credit history, Mrs. Reed, the process would be quite straightforward, Harold assured me. Thank you. I may be in touch about that very soon. My next stop was my law firm's office. Not to work, but to speak with Elise Bennett in our family law division. I'd helped Elise with a complex corporate case last year. Now I needed her expertise. Financially speaking, you've got a clear case of dissipation of marital assets, Elise said after I laid out the situation. The court will likely require him to account for every penny taken from joint funds and potentially reimburse the marital estate. And the deed to the Maine property? Can he sell it without my signature? No, not if it's in both your names, Elise assured me. But you should check the county records immediately to make sure he hasn't attempted to transfer it or take out a loan against it. What about the house he's buying for his girlfriend? Can I make a claim on that? Absolutely. If he used marital funds for the down payment, you have a strong claim. Do you have proof that the money went directly to that purchase? I hesitated. Not yet, but I will. Elise gave me a sympathetic look. Samantha, you know what I'm going to say next. Document everything. Don't confront him until you have all your evidence in order. And whatever you do, don't leave the marital home. That can complicate property division. I nodded, already planning my next move. One more thing, Elise added. Does Daniel know about your personal account? The one your grandmother encouraged you to maintain? No, it's at a different bank, under my maiden name. I've been putting a portion of my bonuses into it for years. Daniel thinks those bonuses are smaller than they actually are. Good. Keep it that way for now. And Samantha, I know this is painful, but you're handling it exactly right. My third stop was the county records office. It took an hour of searching, but I found what I feared. Daniel had indeed submitted paperwork to transfer the main property into his name only, forging my signature on the documents. The transfer hadn't been processed yet, but it was in the system. I immediately filed an objection and fraud alert, using my credentials as an attorney to expedite the process. The clerk assured me the transfer would be flagged and halted pending investigation. As I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Working from home today? Thought we were talking tonight." So he'd been home and noticed my absence. Good. Let him wonder what I was doing. Let him feel a fraction of the uncertainty he'd inflicted on me. I didn't reply. Instead, I drove to one final destination: Oakwood Hills. I needed to see this house he'd bought with our life savings, needed to make it real in my mind. The development was as luxurious as the brochures suggested: sprawling contemporary homes on large lots, with manicured landscaping and views of the city skyline. I found 1420 Willow Creek Drive easily enough. It was one of the largest homes in the development, a modernist structure of glass and steel perched on a hillside. And there, parked in the circular driveway, was Daniel's car. Next to it was a sleek red convertible I didn't recognize, but could guess the owner: Natalie Winters, real estate investment specialist and homewrecker. I drove past slowly, committing every detail to memory: the house, the cars, the empty moving boxes stacked by the garage. Then I circled back and parked on a side street, just close enough to maintain a view of the driveway. I wasn't sure what I was waiting for. Confirmation, perhaps. Some irrefutable proof that what I suspected was true. I didn't have to wait long. Within 20 minutes, Daniel emerged from the house, Natalie following close behind. They paused on the front steps, and he pulled her into an embrace, kissing her in full view of anyone who might be watching. She laughed, tossing her long blonde hair, and playfully pushed him away before sauntering to her convertible. I took photos with my phone, documenting everything. Then I waited until both cars had driven away before approaching the house myself. I didn't attempt to enter. That would be trespassing. But I did walk around the perimeter, taking more photos of the property. On the back patio, workers were installing what looked like an outdoor kitchen. One of them nodded at me. "Beautiful home, isn't it?" he said. "Should be finished by the end of the month." "Yes, it's stunning," I replied, maintaining my composure. "The new owners must be very excited." "Oh yeah, they've been here almost every day," he said cheerfully. "Mr. Reed keeps adding features. No budget limit, he says. Must be nice." No budget limit. With my money. Our money. I thanked the worker and returned to my car, my evidence gathering complete. I now had bank records, legal documentation, photographs, and eyewitness confirmation. Daniel had taken everything we'd built together and used it to create a new life with another woman. He'd stolen our savings, attempted to steal my family property, and was now flaunting his affair in broad daylight, believing I was still in the dark. But darkness was the last place. I was sitting now. I had evidence, I had resources, and most importantly, I had a plan forming. One that would ensure Daniel Reed would regret the day he decided to betray me. Back in my car, I sat staring at the photos I'd taken. Daniel kissing Natalie, the house that should have been our future retirement, the workers casually mentioning no budget limit. My hands trembled, not with grief, but with something sharper, more focused. Rage has clarity, my grandmother used to say. And in that clarity, I began to formulate a plan. I called Elise from the parking lot where I'd stopped to collect myself. "I need to know exactly what my options are," I said without preamble. "Not just for divorce, but for recovering assets, for punitive measures, for everything." "Are you somewhere private?" Elise asked. "Yes." "Good. First, you need to secure copies of all financial records, not just what the bank gave you, but anything in your home office, his email if you have access, tax returns, investment statements, everything." Already started, I confirmed. Next, you need a full accounting of marital assets, properties, vehicles, art, collectibles. Anything of value needs to be documented. I made notes as she spoke, the lawyer in me taking over, compartmentalizing the personal betrayal to focus on the tactical response. What about criminal charges? I asked. He forged my signature on the main property transfer. That's definitely forgery, possibly fraud. You could pursue criminal charges, but I'd hold that as leverage for now. Sometimes the threat of criminal prosecution can motivate a more favorable divorce settlement. Smart. I added it to my notes. And Samantha. Elise's voice softened slightly. You need to decide what you want the end game to be here. Are you looking to punish Daniel, or just to recover what's rightfully yours? The strategy differs depending on your goal. The question caught me off guard. What did I want? Both, I said finally. I want what's mine, but I also want him to face consequences. He stole from me, not just money, but years of my life, my trust. Understandable. Just be careful that pursuing punishment doesn't end up costing you more in the long run. Courts prefer equitable division, not vengeance. After ending the call with Elise, I opened my banking app and checked my personal account, the one Daniel knew nothing about. For 15 years, I'd been depositing portions of my bonuses, tax refunds, even small inheritances from distant relatives. It wasn't just about financial independence. It was about honoring my grandmother's wisdom. Men come and go, she'd told me, but a woman who can stand on her own never falls when they leave. The balance stood at $387,452.69. Not enough to retire on, but more than enough to ensure I wouldn't be destitute while fighting Daniel in court. I stared at the number, an idea forming. An idea my rational mind immediately flagged as risky, potentially self-destructive, definitely emotional rather than logical, but the seed had been planted. I pulled up the Oakwood Hills development website on my phone. The properties surrounding 1420 Willow Creek Drive were still under construction or newly listed. The entire development was being built by Pinnacle Estates, a client of my firm, though not one I personally handled. I scrolled through the available properties, then paused to look up at the darkening sky. Night was falling, and I still hadn't responded to Daniel's text. Let him wonder. Let him worry. I drove home slowly, turning over possibilities in my mind. The house was dark when I arrived. No Daniel. No surprise there. I went directly to our home office and began methodically copying every financial document I could find. Tax returns, investment statements, property records, insurance policies. When the physical documents were secured in a box that I locked in my car trunk, I turned to Daniel's computer. He'd always been careless with passwords. Too trusting, I'd once thought. Now I recognized it as arrogance. He simply never imagined I'd check up on him. His email password was still our wedding anniversary, and his financial accounts were accessible through his saved browser credentials. What I found made my blood boil. Email exchanges with Natalie going back 18 months, plans for the house, discussion of furniture, and worse, jokes about me, about my obliviousness, about how Sammy's too busy with her cases to notice anything. There were emails to his financial advisor discussing how to discreetly reallocate assets ahead of a major life change. Exchanges with a realtor friend about listing our current house when the time is right. He'd even researched international banking in the Cayman Islands. I downloaded everything, backing it up to both a flash drive and a secure cloud account. Then, I carefully closed all the browser windows, leaving no trace of my investigation. While the evidence compiled, I called my oldest friend, Rachel, a real estate developer who specialized in commercial properties. I need some information. On Oakwood Hills, I said after exchanging brief pleasantries. And Pinnacle Estates. Thomas Pinnacle's company? What's going on, Sam? I'll explain everything later. Right now, I just need to know about that development. Market value, profit margins, financing structure. Rachel hesitated. This is unusual, even for you. I know. Trust me, it's important. Fine. I know someone who works there. Give me an hour. While waiting for Rachel's call back, I made a list of decisions that needed immediate attention. Securing valuables, establishing separate credit accounts, notifying my workplace about potential security concerns. Daniel knew my schedule and had occasionally picked me up from the office, and preparing for the inevitable confrontation. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Working late again. Don't wait up. Working late. At his girlfriend's house, no doubt. Selecting curtains with our money. That settled it. I texted back, no problem. Busy with work myself. Rachel called back 50 minutes later. Pinnacle Estates is in trouble, she said without preamble. The Oakwood Hills development was supposed to be their crown jewel, but they're overextended. Construction costs ran over budget, and sales aren't meeting projections. The luxury market is softer than they anticipated. How bad is it? Bad enough that there are rumors Thomas is looking for a silent investor to inject capital. They've halted construction on the remaining lots until they secure additional funding. What about the lots themselves? Are they still for sale? Technically, yes, but they're not marketing them actively until the funding situation is resolved. Why? Sam, what's going on? I took a deep breath. Daniel emptied our savings to buy a house in that development for his girlfriend. Rachel's gasp was audible. That son of a... Yeah, and I'm thinking of making a countermove. What kind of countermove? I'm considering buying property in Oakwood Hills. Multiple properties. Silence on the line. Then, are you thinking what I think you're thinking? That depends on what you think I'm thinking. You want to buy the properties surrounding your husband's love nest. Possibly. Is it feasible? More silence, then the sound of typing. Given what I know about their financial position, yes, probably, especially if you're dealing directly with Thomas Pinnacle. He needs liquidity, and banks are being cautious after the recent rate hikes. How would I approach this? Carefully, Rachel said. Very carefully. What kind of budget are we talking about? I told her the balance in my personal account. Plus, I could secure a line of credit against my stock portfolio if needed. Let me make some calls. Don't do anything yet. After hanging up, I sat, in the quiet of our home office, weighing the risks against the potential satisfaction. What I was considering wasn't just a financial decision. It was a declaration of war. It would drain my safety net, commit me to debt, and potentially complicate the divorce proceedings. But it would also send a message that Daniel Reed had severely underestimated his wife. My phone buzzed with an email from Rachel. Details on 5 available lots surrounding 1420 Willow Creek Drive, with a note that Thomas Pinnacle was hungry for a deal and could possibly offer a package discount. I stared at the property maps, the proposed structures, the asking prices. Then I looked at the photo I'd taken of Daniel kissing Natalie in front of their dream home. A home purchased with my stolen future. Decision time. I could play this safe, follow the standard divorce playbook, and eventually recover a portion of what was rightfully mine. Or I could make a bold move that might be financially risky, but would ensure Daniel learned a valuable lesson about consequences. I typed a response to Rachel. Set up a meeting with Thomas Pinnacle, tomorrow, if possible. She replied almost immediately, Are you absolutely sure about this? No, I wasn't sure. This was emotional, potentially self-destructive, definitely not the wisest use of my financial resources. But as I thought about Daniel and Natalie planning their perfect life in their perfect house with my money, something hardened inside me. A resolve that went beyond financial calculations or legal strategies. Yes, I typed back. I'm sure. Tomorrow would bring either the first step toward the biggest mistake of my life, or the beginning of the most satisfying revenge I could imagine. Either way, Daniel Reed was about to discover that I was far from the oblivious workaholic wife he thought he'd married, and Thomas Pinnacle was about to meet a highly motivated buyer. Sleep came in fitful bursts that night. I woke at 4:30 a.m., mind racing, and gave up on rest entirely. By 5:15, I was showered, dressed in my most imposing charcoal suit, and reviewing my notes over a strong cup of coffee when I heard Daniel's key in the front door. He entered quietly, obviously trying not to wake me. I watched from the kitchen as he crept through the darkened living room, his tie loosened, shirt wrinkled. The sight of him, this stranger who wore my husband's face, sent a surge of anger through me so powerful I had to grip the countertop to steady myself. Late night, I observed, my voice carrying in the silent house. Daniel startled visibly, hand flying to his chest. "Jesus, Samantha, you scared me. What are you doing up so early?" "Waiting for my husband." I took a deliberate sip of coffee. "You never came home last night." He approached cautiously, setting his briefcase down. I noticed he still carried the facade of work, the leather portfolio, the laptop bag, props in his ongoing performance of the dedicated architect working. "Late. Client emergency," he said, loosening his tie further. "The Matthews project. Foundation issues. I told you I'd be late." "The Matthews project," I repeated. "Interesting, because according to your firm's website, that project was completed 3 months ago." A flicker of something, panic, calculation, crossed his face before his expression settled into concerned confusion. "You're thinking of the original phase. This is the expansion." "There is no expansion, Daniel." I checked. He poured himself coffee, buying time to think. "I misspoke. It's the Wilson development." "Stop lying." The words came out softer than I intended, but they hit with enough force to make him freeze mid-sip. "I know where you were last night. What are you talking about?" He attempted indignation, but his eyes darted toward his briefcase where, I was certain, evidence of his double life was hidden. "I know about Natalie. I know about the house in Oakwood Hills. And I know about the money." His face went through a series of expressions: shock, denial, calculation, and finally, of forced confusion. "Samantha, I think you've misunderstood something. Who's Natalie?" I laughed then, a sound so bitter it surprised even me. "Really? That's your play? Complete denial?" I pushed away from the counter and walked to my laptop, opening it to reveal a photo gallery. "Here's you and Natalie yesterday afternoon, kissing in front of 1420 Willow Creek Drive, the house you bought with our savings." Daniel stared at the screen, the color draining from his face. For a moment, I thought he might continue to deny everything. Instead, he slumped into a chair. "How did you find out?" he asked finally. "You withdrew $215,000 from our joint savings 3 days ago. Did you really think I wouldn't notice?" "I was going to tell you. I just needed time to figure out how to explain." "Explain what?" My voice rose despite my efforts to remain calm. "Explain how you've been systematically emptying our accounts for over a year? How you tried to transfer my family's property by forging my signature? How you've been planning an entire life with another woman while lying to my face?" His head snapped up. "The main property has been secured," I interrupted. "Your forgery has been flagged with the county clerk. You're lucky I haven't filed criminal charges." "You're overreacting," Daniel said, switching tactics. "This isn't what it looks like. It looks like you stole our life savings to buy a house for your girlfriend." "It's an investment property," he insisted. "Yes, I've been seeing Natalie, but the house is just a good real estate opportunity. I was planning to tell you once it appreciated. We could have made a significant profit." I stared at him, astonished by his audacity. "An investment property where you're installing custom cabinetry and an outdoor kitchen? Where you've been selecting furniture and fixtures together? where you spent the night instead of coming home to your wife. He looked away, jaw working. Our marriage hasn't been working for a long time, Samantha. You know that. What I know is that instead of having an adult conversation about our issues, you decided to steal from me and lie to me. I didn't steal. It was joint money, Daniel. Money we saved together for our future. Money I earned every bit as much as you did. You've been checked out of this marriage for years, he countered, anger finally breaking through his controlled facade. Always at the office, always prioritizing your cases over our relationship. What was I supposed to do? I don't know, I replied, my voice steady despite the rage coursing through me. Perhaps not embezzle from our joint accounts? Not forge my signature on legal documents? Not make plans to sell our house out from under me? His eyes widened, slightly at the last accusation. I'd caught him off guard again. Oh yes, I found those emails too. Very comprehensive exit strategy you had planned. I closed my laptop and faced him squarely. So here's what happens now. I've documented everything. The withdrawals, the forgery attempt, the emails. I've consulted with a divorce attorney. You have exactly 2 choices. Daniel's expression hardened. Are you threatening me? I'm stating facts. Choice 1, you transfer the $15,000 back into a joint account under court supervision while we proceed with an equitable divorce. You make no further attempts to dispose of marital assets. You come clean about every account, every investment, every property. And choice 2? His tone was dismissive, as if humoring a child. I file for divorce citing financial fraud and dissipation of marital assets. I provide evidence of the forgery to the district attorney. I contact your firm about the misuse of company time and resources to conduct your affair, and I ensure that every client, colleague, and friend knows exactly who you really are. The color drained from his face again. Daniel's professional reputation was everything to him. The thought of his partners, his clients, knowing what he'd done, it was the one thing I knew would truly devastate him. You wouldn't, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Try me. I stood, gathering my belongings. You have 24 hours to decide. I'll be staying at the Westlake Hotel until then. You're leaving? You just said that you shouldn't leave the marital home. That's legal advice, and it's sound. But I can't stomach the sight of you right now, and I have meetings to attend. Meetings? What meetings? I allowed myself a small, cold smile. That's no longer your concern. I picked up my purse and briefcase. 24 hours, Daniel. Then I start filing paperwork. As I headed for the door, he called after me. Samantha, wait. We should talk about this. There might be a compromise. I turned back, incredulous. A compromise? You stole our life savings, bought a house for your mistress, tried to steal my family property, and planned to divorce me only after you'd hidden as many assets as possible. What exactly is the compromise position here? He had no answer. I'll be back tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Have your decision ready. The cool morning air felt cleansing as I walked to my car. My hands weren't shaking anymore. The confrontation had gone more or less as I'd expected. Denial, then minimizing, then blame shifting, then attempts to negotiate. Classic Daniel, using the same tactics he employed in difficult client meetings. But I wasn't a client to be managed, and I was far from the passive, workaholic wife he clearly believed me to be. My meeting with Thomas Pinnacle was scheduled for 9 a.m. at his downtown office. Rachel had arranged everything, briefing me on Pinnacle's financial pressures and the development's challenges. I had 2 hours to prepare, to shift my mind from wounded wife to shrewd investor. I drove to a quiet cafe near Pinnacle Estates headquarters, ordered breakfast I couldn't taste, and reviewed the property portfolios Rachel had sent over. 5. Lots surrounding 1420 Willow Creek Drive, all with spectacular views, all currently in various stages of pre-construction. The total asking price for all 5 was just over $1 million, far more than my personal savings could cover. But Rachel had been thorough. She'd included financial projections, comparative market analyses, and a detailed breakdown of Pinnacle's current cash flow problems. The company had overextended, borrowing heavily to develop Oakwood Hills based on projections that the luxury market would continue its post-pandemic surge. Instead, rising interest rates had cooled demand, leaving them with unsold inventory and ongoing construction costs. They needed cash, and they needed it now, which meant I potentially had leverage. At precisely 8:55 a.m., I walked into Pinnacle Estates' gleaming headquarters, projecting the confidence I'd cultivated through years of high-stakes corporate negotiations. The receptionist directed me to a conference room where Rachel was waiting, along with a middle-aged man in an expensive but slightly rumpled suit. "Samantha," Rachel greeted me warmly. "This is Thomas Pinnacle." Thomas shook my hand firmly. "Ms. Reed, Rachel speaks highly of your investment acumen." "I've been waiting for the right opportunity," I replied, setting my briefcase on the polished conference table. "I believe Oakwood Hills might be it." For the next hour, Thomas presented the development vision, highlighting amenities, projected property value increases, and the exclusivity of the neighborhood. I listened attentively, asking pointed questions about construction timelines, material quality, and management of the community once completed. "I understand you're interested in multiple properties," Thomas said finally, getting to the heart of the matter. "May I ask what your intended use would be? Investment rentals?" "A combination of personal use and investment," I said vaguely. "I'm particularly interested in lots 16 through 20. Thomas's eyebrows rose slightly. "Those are prime lots, some of the best views in the development." "I'm aware." I opened my portfolio and slid a document across the table. "This is my offer for all 5 lots." He glanced down at the number I'd proposed. $1, $65 million, significantly below the asking price, and frowned. "This is well under market value, Ms. Reed." "It's a cash offer," I countered. "And given Pinnacle Estates' current liquidity challenges, I believe it represents a mutually beneficial solution." Thomas's expression tightened. "Our financial position is precarious," I finished for him. "Your construction loans for phases 2 and 3 are coming due, sales have slowed due to interest rate hikes, and your primary lender has declined to extend additional credit. Meanwhile, you have contractors to pay and investors growing nervous." Rachel shot me a warning look. I was being too direct, potentially alienating him, but Thomas surprised us both by laughing ruefully. "Rachel mentioned you were thorough. I see she wasn't exaggerating." He studied the offer again. "Even with our current challenges, this is too low. I anticipated you might feel that way." I slid another document across the table. "This is my revised offer of $1, $85 million with 2 conditions. Which are: first, an expedited closing, 7 days instead of the standard 30. He nodded slowly. "Possible, given the circumstances." "And the second condition?" "Absolute confidentiality regarding this purchase. No public records beyond what's legally required. No press releases. No inclusion of this sale in your marketing materials." Thomas frowned. "That's unusual. These sales typically help generate interest in the remaining properties. Nevertheless, that's my condition." He studied me with new interest. "This isn't just a financial investment for you, is it, Ms. Reed?" I met his gaze steadily. "Every investment has personal elements, Mr. Pinnacle." "Indeed." He tapped the offer document thoughtfully. "I'll need to consult with my partners. But given the circumstances, I believe we may be able to work something out. I'll need an answer by tomorrow morning." "That's very little time for consideration." "I understand. But my financing situation has its own timeline constraints." This was a lie, but a necessary one. I needed this deal closed before Daniel had time to counter-move before he realized what I was planning. Thomas stood, extending his hand. "I'll call you first thing tomorrow with our decision." "I appreciate your time," I said, shaking his hand. Outside in the hallway, Rachel grabbed my arm. "That was aggressive, even for you. What's really going on, Sam?" I pulled her into an empty meeting room and shut the door. "I need to tell you something, and I need you not to judge me." For the next 20 minutes, I outlined everything. Daniel's affair, the stolen money, the house at 1420 Willow Creek, my confrontation with him that morning, and what I planned to do if I secured the surrounding properties. Rachel listened without interruption, her expression shifting from shock to outrage to grudging admiration. When I finished, she let out a long, low whistle. "This is either the most brilliant revenge plot I've ever heard or a financial disaster. In the making," she said finally. "Possibly both," I admitted. "You realize that even if Thomas accepts your offer, you'll be leveraged to the hilt? That your divorce proceedings could complicate matters significantly?" "I've calculated the risks." Rachel shook her head. "No, you haven't. Not fully. You're running on anger and adrenaline right now, Sam." "So what would you do?" I challenged. "If it were your husband, your savings?" She was quiet for a moment. "Probably exactly what you're doing," she conceded. "But as your friend, I have to point out that this is objectively crazy." "Noted. That said," she continued, "if you're determined to do this, let me help you structure it properly. We should create an LLC to hold the properties, something that won't immediately trace back to you. And we should bring in a financial advisor to manage the leverage aspect." Relief washed over me. I'd been so focused on executing my plan that I hadn't fully considered all the technical aspects. "Thank you," I said simply. "Don't thank me yet. If Thomas accepts your offer, the real work begins." My phone buzzed with a text. "Daniel, we need to talk. Please come home." A second text followed immediately. "I'm ready to return the money. All of it." I showed the messages to Rachel, who raised an eyebrow. "That was fast. What are you going to do?" "Keep him waiting," I decided. "I want to see if Thomas accepts. My offer first. And then?" I considered the question. "Then I'll go home and listen to whatever story Daniel has constructed to explain his actions. I'll nod in all the right places. I'll accept his offer to return the money, and I won't say a word about Oakwood Hills or my plans." Cold, Rachel. Observed. But well-deserved. The rest of the day passed in a blur of phone calls, emails, and meetings. I contacted a financial advisor Rachel recommended, established a new LLC named Horizon Properties with myself as the sole owner, and arranged for a bank wire transfer to cover the down payment if Thomas accepted my offer. By 6 p.m., I was exhausted, but too wired to rest. I checked into the Westlake Hotel as planned, ignoring 3 more increasingly urgent texts from Daniel. Let him stew in his own anxiety. Let him wonder what I was planning. I ordered room service and tried to distract myself with work, but my mind kept returning to the confrontation that morning, to the look on Daniel's face when he realized I knew everything. Part of me, a small, wounded part, had hoped for genuine remorse, for some indication that he valued what we'd built together. Instead, he'd offered excuses, minimization, blame-shifting, classic manipulator tactics. At 8:37 p.m., my phone rang. Thomas Pinnacle. "Ms. Reed," he began without preamble, "I've discussed your offer with my partners. We're prepared to accept $9 million for all 5 lots, with your conditions of expedited closing and confidentiality." My heart raced. "Split the difference at $175 million and you have a deal." He chuckled. "You drive a hard bargain. But yes, we can make that work." "Excellent. My attorney will contact yours first thing tomorrow to begin the paperwork." "May I ask one question, Ms. Reed?" "You may ask." Does this have anything to do with the Reed property at 1420 Willow Creek? The timing seems coincidental. I paused, weighing my response. Let's just say I have a personal interest in the neighborhood. I suspected as much. He paused. The buyer of that property, Mr. Reed, he wouldn't happen to be related. To you? My husband, I said simply. Another pause. I see. Well, Oakwood Hills is a small community, Ms. Reed. Neighbors tend to know each other's business. I'm counting on it, Mr. Pinnacle. After ending the call, I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, the magnitude of what I'd just done washing over me. I'd committed to spending nearly every penny of my personal savings and taking on significant debt to buy 5 lots surrounding my husband's love nest. Objectively, it was financial madness. But as I thought about Daniel and Natalie planning their perfect life in their perfect house with my money, I felt a cold satisfaction settling in my chest. They had no idea what was coming. My phone buzzed again. Daniel, please come home. I've made a terrible mistake. I want to make things right. Too little, too late. But he didn't need to know that yet. I texted back. I'll be home tomorrow morning at 8 as planned. We can talk then. His response came immediately. Thank you. I love you. The words, once treasured, now hollow, made me laugh bitterly. I didn't bother responding. Instead, I called Elise, my divorce attorney, and updated her on the property purchase. You're buying 5 lots in Oakwood Hills? She repeated, disbelief evident in her voice. With your personal funds? Through an LLC, yes. Samantha, I have to advise against this. Financially, it's extremely risky. And if Daniel's attorneys discover this purchase during divorce proceedings, they could argue you were hiding assets or deliberately depleting your own resources to spite him. I'm using money he never knew existed, I pointed out. Money I kept separate throughout our marriage. Even so, the timing and nature of this purchase could be problematic. What's your end game here? I considered the question. Accountability. Consequences. Justice. Those are abstract concepts, not financial or legal strategies, Elise said gently. What if I told you this purchase could potentially leverage a more favorable divorce settlement? She sighed. I'd say you're playing a dangerous game, but... She paused. As your attorney, I should advise caution. As a woman who's seen too many men walk away unscathed from marriages they've destroyed. I understand the impulse. Will you help me structure this properly, to protect myself legally? That's my job. Send me the purchase agreement when you have it. And Samantha, be careful tomorrow when you see Daniel. Men like him, men who can justify stealing from May. Their wives who can compartmentalize betrayal. They don't react well when their carefully constructed narratives fall apart. Her warning stayed with me as I prepared for bed. Daniel had never been physically threatening, but I'd also never challenged him this directly before. I'd never disrupted his plans or held him truly accountable. Tomorrow would change everything. I would listen to his excuses, accept his offer to return the money, and give no indication of my own plans. Then, when the property purchase closed next week, Daniel and Natalie would discover exactly who their new neighbor was, the woman whose future they'd tried to steal, now controlling every property surrounding their dream home. Sweet dreams, Daniel. Enjoy your last night of believing you've won. Morning arrived with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I stood under the hotel shower, hot water washing away the remnants of a restless night, mentally preparing for my meeting with Daniel. Today would require a performance, appearing to accept his explanations while revealing nothing of my plans. My phone rang as I was dressing. Rachel. The paperwork is ready, she said without preamble. Thomas had his legal team work through the night. They're eager to move forward. That's surprisingly efficient, I replied, fastening my watch, a vintage Cartier that had been my grandmother's, one of the few valuables I'd brought with me to the hotel. Desperate times, Their quarterly financials are due next week, and this sale will dramatically improve their cash position. But Sam, I need to confirm. You're absolutely sure about this? Once we sign today, this is happening. I paused, considering one final time. I'm sure. Then we have a meeting with the Pinnacle Estates attorneys at noon. I've also arranged for financial advisors to meet us afterward to structure the loans needed for the balance. Thank you, Rachel. I don't know how I'd manage this without you. That's what friends are for, helping execute financially questionable revenge schemes. I detected the concern beneath her humor. I know how this looks. Impulsive, emotional, maybe even self-destructive. All of the above, she agreed. But I also know what it's like to have everything you've worked for taken away by someone who promised to be your partner. If anyone deserves this kind of comeuppance, it's Daniel. After hanging up, I checked my appearance one last time. Tailored navy suit, minimal makeup, hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. Professional, controlled, unreadable. The armor I'd wear to face Daniel. The drive home felt surreal. For 15 years, I'd made this commute, returning to what I believed was a partnership. Now I was returning to ground zero of a betrayal so profound it had altered my understanding of my entire marriage. Daniel's car was in the driveway. So was another vehicle I didn't recognize. A black sedan with tinted windows. Unexpected company. Wasn't part of my plan. I entered cautiously, senses alert. Voices came from the kitchen. Daniel's and another man's. I followed the sound to find Daniel sitting at our kitchen island, with a silver-haired man in an expensive suit. Coffee cups and financial documents were spread between them. Samantha. Daniel rose quickly, tension evident in every line of his body. He'd dressed carefully. The blue shirt I'd once mentioned brought out his eyes, the watch I'd given him for our 10th anniversary. A calculated choice, no doubt. This is Martin Whitley, our financial advisor. Our financial advisor. A man I'd never met despite 15 years of marriage. Another compartment in Daniel's carefully separated life. Mrs. Reed, Martin extended his hand. A pleasure to finally meet you. I shook his hand briefly, my gaze fixed on Daniel. I wasn't aware we had scheduled a meeting. I asked Martin to come help us sort through the financial situation. Daniel explained. He's prepared some options for recovering the withdrawn funds and restructuring our accounts. So this was his strategy. Bring in a third party, a professional, to sanitize his actions. To reframe theft as a financial situation that needed restructuring. I see, I said, setting my purse down. And is Martin aware of exactly how this financial situation came about? Martin cleared his throat uncomfortably. Daniel has explained that there was a miscommunication about some investment decisions. A miscommunication, I repeated flatly. Is that what we're calling it? Daniel shot me a pleading look. Samantha, please. Martin has been working all night on solutions that would benefit both of us. I took a deep breath, reminding myself of my strategy. Let him think he's managing the situation. Reveal nothing about Oakwood Hills. Very well. I took a seat at the island. I'm listening. Martin launched into a presentation about liquidating the new investment. He carefully avoided calling it a house. Transferring funds back to joint accounts and implementing a more transparent decision-making process for future financial moves. I listened impassively, noting how skillfully the narrative had been reconstructed. No mention of Natalie. No acknowledgement of the affair. No recognition of the forgery attempt on the main property. Just a clinical discussion of moving money around as if it were a simple accounting error rather than a deliberate betrayal. When Martin finished, he looked between us expectantly. With these steps, we can have the majority of funds restored to joint control within 7 business days. The remaining assets would follow within 30 days, once the property situation is resolved. The property situation, I echoed. You mean the house my husband purchased for his girlfriend using our life savings? Martin's professional facade cracked slightly. He glanced at Daniel, who had gone pale. I, uh, wasn't aware of the personal aspects. Clearly, I cut him off. Daniel, did you also mention that you attempted to transfer my family's main property by forging my signature? Or that you've been systematically emptying our accounts for over a year? Or that you've been planning to divorce me after hiding as many assets as possible? The kitchen fell silent. Martin looked like he wanted to disappear into his expensive suit. I believe, he said finally, gathering his papers, that you two have some matters to discuss privately before we proceed with any financial restructuring. Martin, wait, Daniel began, but the financial advisor was already heading for the door. I'll be in touch, Martin called over his shoulder, making his escape with admirable speed. When the front door closed, Daniel turned to me, anger replacing the conciliatory expression he'd maintained in front of Martin. Was that necessary? He was here to help. He was here to help you construct a narrative that avoided accountability, I corrected. Just like you've been constructing narratives our entire marriage, apparently. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, visibly recalibrating his approach. I made a terrible mistake, Samantha. I got caught up in something that it isn't what I really want. What you want is to avoid consequences. What I want is to save our marriage, he insisted, reaching for my hand across the island. I pulled back. By that, you mean you want to save your reputation, your professional standing, and as much of your comfortable lifestyle as possible. That's not fair. No, what's not fair is stealing $215,000 from your wife. He flinched at the direct accusation. I can return all of it. That's why Martin was here, to facilitate the transfer. And Natalie? The house in Oakwood Hills? What happens to those? Daniel hesitated, calculation evident in his eyes. Natalie and I, that situation is ending. The house can be sold, or we could keep it as an actual investment property. Whatever you want. Whatever I want. As if he were offering a generous compromise rather than being cornered into returning what he'd stolen. What I want, I said carefully, is for you to transfer the full amount back to our joint account today. Not in 7 business days. Not in 30 days. Today. The bank needs time to... The bank can process wire transfers instantly. You managed to move the money out quickly enough. He studied my face, perhaps searching for wiggle room and finding none. Fine. I'll call the bank now and initiate the transfer. You'll do it while I watch, I clarified. And you'll transfer exactly $215,000, plus an additional $7,195 that I've documented you removed in smaller amounts over the past 6 weeks. His eyebrows rose slightly. I could almost see him recalculating, wondering exactly how much I knew, how long I'd been paying attention. I'll need my laptop, he said finally. Get it. While Daniel retrieved his computer, I texted Rachel. Still on for noon meeting. Currently watching Daniel return stolen funds. She responded immediately. Everything okay? Need backup? Under control, I replied. But stay available? Always. Daniel returned, setting up his laptop on the island. He logged into his bank account. Not our joint account, but a personal one I hadn't known existed until I'd started investigating. The balance was $241,327.89, confirming my suspicion that he hadn't spent all the stolen money on the house down payment. He'd kept a cushion for himself. The full amount, I reminded him as he prepared the transfer. He nodded, entering $222,895 into the transfer field. His finger hovered over the confirm button for a moment before he pressed it. The screen showed a processing message, then confirmation. Money returned, at least on paper. I'll need to verify this with the bank directly, I said. I just showed you the confirmation. And you've just demonstrated that you can't be trusted. With financial matters, I'll call the bank myself. His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. I made the call, confirming that the transfer had indeed been initiated and would be completed by end of day. One small victory. Now, about the main property, I said after hanging up. I've already contacted the county clerk to withdraw the transfer request, Daniel said quickly. It won't go through. That's not enough. I need a notarized statement acknowledging that you attempted to fraudulently transfer the property by forging my signature. You're not serious. His face darkened. That would be admitting to a crime. Yes, it would. The crime you committed. Samantha, be reasonable. I'm cooperating. I've returned the money. The property transfer won't happen. Why do you need a written confession? Insurance, I said simply. We stared at each other across the kitchen island, the power dynamic between us irrevocably altered. For perhaps the first time in our marriage, Daniel was not controlling the narrative, not charming or manipulating his way out of a situation. Fine, he said finally. I'll have something drafted. Today. It will take time to... Today, Daniel. Or I call the district attorney's office this afternoon. He swallowed hard, and I knew I had won this round. I'll have it by the end of the day. I checked my watch. Almost 10:30. I needed to leave soon to meet Rachel in the Pinnacle. Estate's attorneys at noon. I have appointments this afternoon, I said, standing. I'll expect the notarized statement by 6 p.m. You're leaving? We still have so much to discuss. Our relationship? Next steps? Our relationship, I repeated. You mean the 15-year marriage you were planning to exit after hiding as many assets as possible? That relationship? People make mistakes, Samantha. Terrible ones. But they can be forgiven. It was so tempting to reveal everything then, to tell him about the properties I was about to purchase, about the trap closing around him, to see his face when he realized I had outmaneuvered him. But that would have to wait. We'll discuss forgiveness another time, I said instead. Right now, I need that notarized statement acknowledging the forgery. As I turned to leave, he asked, Where are you going? To see your lawyer? My appointments are no longer your concern, Daniel. His face hardened. So that's it? I return the money, provide the statement, and you still keep me at arm's length? What more do you want from me? I paused at the doorway, considering the question. What did I want? Revenge, yes. Justice, certainly. But beyond that? Time, I said finally. Time to decide whether anything about our marriage was real or if it was all just another investment opportunity for you. I left him standing in the kitchen, his carefully constructed world continuing to unravel around him. In the car, I allowed myself a moment to breathe, to process what had just happened. Daniel was scrambling, trying to mitigate damage, salvage, what he could, exactly as expected. But he still had no idea what was coming. I drove downtown to meet Rachel, my mind focused on the next steps. The property purchase, the financing arrangements, the carefully orchestrated reveal that would come once everything was finalized. Rachel was waiting in the lobby of the Pinnacle Estates building, tablet in hand, looking every inch the successful real estate developer in her tailored pantsuit. You okay? She asked immediately, studying my face. You look like you've been through the ringer. Just a tense morning with Daniel, I said. He returned the money. All of it? Every penny I could document. And he's preparing a statement about the forgery attempt. Rachel raised an eyebrow. That's surprisingly compliant. He's in damage control mode. Brought in his financial advisor to help construct a narrative about miscommunication and investment decisions. Classic. Reframe theft as a business decision gone wrong. She checked her watch. Ready to do this? Once we sign, there's no turning back. I nodded. I'm ready. Thomas Pinnacle greeted us warmly in the conference room, flanked by two attorneys and his chief financial officer. Ms. Reed, excellent timing. We have everything prepared. For the next hour, I reviewed and signed document after document. Purchase, agreements, loan applications, transfer authorizations. Rachel had arranged financing through her contacts for the portion my savings wouldn't cover, structuring it through the newly created Horizon Properties LLC. By 1:30 p.m., it was done. I had committed nearly every penny of my personal savings and taken on substantial debt to purchase 5 luxury lots surrounding my husband's love nest. Congratulations, Thomas said as we concluded. You now own a significant portion of Oakwood Hill's most desirable real estate. When can construction begin? I asked. As soon as you'd like. The infrastructure is already in place. Roads, utilities, foundation preparations. Your lots are essentially build-ready. Perfect. I'll be in touch soon with architectural plans. Outside, Rachel steered me toward a nearby restaurant. You need food and probably a drink. That was intense. Over lunch, I couldn't help checking my bank account repeatedly, watching my balance decrease dramatically as the down payment transfer processed. It was terrifying and exhilarating simultaneously. Second thoughts? Rachel asked, noticing my fixation on my phone. Financial vertigo, I admitted. I've just committed to more debt than I've ever carried in my life. All to become the neighbor from hell to your cheating husband, she noted. Still worth it? I considered the question. Ask me in a month. But right now, yes. Then let's talk next steps. You own the land, but that's just the beginning. What's your actual plan for these properties? I pulled out a notebook where I'd been drafting ideas. I'm thinking of building a single home on one lot, something modest but elegant. Then on the surrounding lots, things that would make life interesting for Daniel and Natalie. Interesting how? I'm still working out the details, but I'm considering options that would affect their privacy, their views, and their property value. Rachel looked skeptical. You need to be careful. Zoning regulations and HOA rules will limit what you can do. I've already reviewed the Oakwood Hills HOA covenant, I said. It's surprisingly flexible compared to most luxury developments. Thomas was so eager to sell lots initially that he kept restrictions minimal. My phone rang, interrupting our planning. Daniel. I need to take this, I told Rachel, stepping away from the table. Daniel? What is it? I have the notarized statement, he said. Can we meet to discuss next steps? Maybe dinner tonight? I'm busy tonight, I replied. Leave the statement with Gloria at my office. She's expecting it. Samantha, please. We need to talk about us, about the future. I've done everything you asked. You've begun to address the financial aspects of your betrayal, I corrected. That's hardly everything. What more do you want? Frustration edged his voice. Time. I repeated my earlier answer. I need time, Daniel. While you're taking time, can you at least tell me if you're planning to file for divorce? I need to know what we're dealing with here. That depends on what else I discover, I said carefully. You've hidden quite a bit from me already. I'm still assessing the full extent of your deception. His silence told me he was weighing my words, trying to determine if I knew about other hidden assets or indiscretions. There's nothing else, he said finally. I've told you everything. Another lie. He still hadn't volunteered information about the separate bank account I'd discovered, the Cayman Islands research, or the plans to list our house. We'll see, I said. I'll be in touch when I'm ready to talk further. I ended the call and returned to Rachel, who gave me a questioning look. Daniel's getting anxious, I explained. He wants to know if I'm filing for divorce. Are you? I sighed. Eventually, probably. But right now, keeping him uncertain gives me leverage. Rachel nodded, then hesitated before speaking again. Sam, I need to ask, what's your endgame here? You've committed massive resources to this plan. What's the best outcome for you? It was the question I'd been avoiding, even in my own mind. What did I want to achieve beyond the immediate satisfaction of turning the tables on Daniel? Justice, I said after a moment. Financial security. And maybe something less definable. Reclaiming power in a situation where I was made to feel powerless. And after that? After Daniel gets his comeuppance and you've made your point? What then? Then, I looked out the restaurant window at the city skyline, considering a future I hadn't allowed myself to envision yet. Then I rebuild. On my terms. Rachel reached across the table and squeezed my hand. That's what I needed to hear. That this is about your future, not just his punishment. It's about both, I admitted. Is that terrible? No, she said firmly. It's human. And after what he did, entirely justified. We spent the next 2 hours refining plans for the Oakwood Hills properties, consulting with an architect Rachel knew who could quickly draft preliminary designs. By late afternoon, I had a clearer vision of exactly how I would use my newly acquired real estate to deliver the message Daniel so desperately needed to hear. Actions have consequences. As I drove home that evening, physically exhausted but mentally invigorated, I thought about the support system that had materialized around me. Rachel, with her unwavering loyalty and practical assistance, Elise with her legal expertise and cautious guidance, even Thomas Pinnacle with his surprisingly accommodating approach to my unusual demands. Daniel had underestimated me. He'd seen a workaholic wife too absorbed in her career to notice his betrayal. What he'd failed to recognize was that the same qualities that made me a successful attorney, attention to detail, strategic thinking, and the ability to build alliances, were now focused entirely on responding to his betrayal. And in 7 days, when the property purchase closed and construction plans were filed, he would begin to understand exactly who he had crossed. The next 5 days passed in a carefully orchestrated dance. Daniel called daily, his messages growing, increasingly desperate as I maintained my distance. I'd return to our house but kept interactions minimal, sleeping in the guest room and leaving early each morning. His attempts at reconciliation, flowers delivered to my office, dinner reservations at my favorite restaurant, even a jewelry box that remained unopened on the kitchen counter, grew more elaborate by the day. Meanwhile, beneath the surface of this marital standoff, my plan accelerated. Rachel had connected me with Vivian Lloyd, an architect with a reputation for both innovative design and remarkable speed. Within 48 hours of our initial meeting, Vivian had produced preliminary sketches for what would be built on my 5 Oakwood Hills lots. The main residence on Lot 18 is straightforward, Vivian explained as we reviewed the plans in her downtown studio. Contemporary design, complementary to the neighborhood aesthetic, nothing that would raise eyebrows with the HOA. I nodded approvingly at the elegant yet modest home design. And the other lots? A smile flickered across Vivian's face. That's where it gets interesting. She flipped to the next set of renderings. For Lot 17, directly adjacent to 1420, Willow Creek, I'm proposing what appears to be a guest house but is actually designed to block their primary western view, the sunset over the valley that's featured prominently in their property listing. Without violating any HOA restrictions? Completely within guidelines, the structure is positioned at the maximum permitted height and at an angle that respects setback requirements while maximizing view obstruction. She flipped to the next page. For Lot 19 on the eastern boundary, a similar approach with what presents as a modernist art studio. Perfect, I murmured, studying the renderings. Now, for Lots 16 and 20, Vivian continued, we get more creative. The HOA permits recreational facilities, so for Lot 20, I'm suggesting a tennis court with regulation lighting. Lighting that would shine directly into their master bedroom, I noted with satisfaction. Coincidentally, yes. Vivian's professional demeanor slipped just enough to reveal a glint of mischief. And, for Lot 16, behind their property, a community pavilion. The HOA allows for shared recreational spaces, and as the owner of multiple lots, you're entitled to create amenities for your guests. A pavilion that would eliminate any privacy in their backyard, I concluded. Precisely. All designs strictly adhere to HOA regulations while maximizing the impact on neighboring properties. I studied the complete package. 5 properties surrounding 1420 Willow Creek Drive, each strategically designed to diminish the value and enjoyment of Daniel and Natalie's dream home. It was vindictive, expensive, and undeniably satisfying. How quickly can construction begin? I asked. Once permits are approved, which my contacts at the city can expedite, we could break ground within 2 weeks. The main residence would take 6 to 8 months, but the structures on the other lots could be completed much faster, especially the tennis court and pavilion. Excellent. Let's proceed. As I left Vivian's studio, my phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. We need to talk. New information about Daniel. Lunch? We met at a small cafe near my office, far from any of Daniel's usual haunts. Rachel was already waiting, a folder on the table beside her untouched sandwich. What's happened? I asked, sliding into the seat across from her. I did some digging through my real estate contacts, she said, voice low despite the private corner table. Daniel's been busy this week. Define busy. She opened the folder and pushed it toward me. He listed your house with Premier Realty yesterday. Private listing, not yet on the MLS, but actively being shopped to select buyers. I stared at the listing sheet, blood rushing in my ears. Our home, the colonial we'd renovated room by room, where I'd imagined growing old together, showcased in professional photos with an asking price well above market value. He can't sell without my signature, I said, the words sounding distant to my own ears. No, but the listing agent told my contact that the seller assured them spousal approval wasn't an issue, that it was a mutual decision as part of relocating for a job opportunity. Another lie, another secret plan. There's more, Rachel continued, flipping to the next document. He's made inquiries about refinancing the Oakwood Hills property to pull out equity. My guess is he's trying to raise capital quickly. Because I made him return the stolen money, I concluded. He needs funds to continue with whatever exit strategy he was planning. That would be my assessment. Rachel studied me with concern. Are you okay? I took a measured breath. I'm fine. Actually, this helps clarify my next steps. Which are? Accelerating the timeline. The property closing is scheduled for tomorrow. I want construction to begin immediately after, starting with the lots most visible from 1420 Willow Creek. Rachel nodded slowly, making a statement. Exactly. Daniel thinks he's still controlling this situation, listing our house without telling me, trying to extract equity from the Oakwood Hills property. It's time he understood otherwise. Have you spoken with Elise about this new development? Not yet. I'll call her this afternoon. I tapped the listing sheet. This changes my approach to the divorce. I was considering a measured, private resolution. Now I'm inclined toward something more definitive. Rachel's expression was sympathetic but concerned. Just be careful the revenge doesn't consume you, Sam. I'm all for making Daniel face consequences, but not at the cost of your own well-being. I appreciate the concern, I said, reaching for her hand. But this isn't just emotional now. He's actively trying to dispose of marital assets after being explicitly warned not to. That crosses from personal betrayal into legal territory. After lunch, I called Elise and forwarded the listing information. This is unbelievable, she said after reviewing the documents. He's acting in direct contravention of his fiduciary duties to the marital estate after already being caught once. Options? We file for divorce immediately, citing financial fraud and dissipation of assets. We request temporary orders freezing all marital assets and prohibiting any property transfers. And we formally request the court appoint a forensic accountant to review all financial records. Do it, I authorized. Today, if possible. I'll have papers prepared this afternoon. We can file first thing tomorrow. She paused. Samantha, you should be prepared. Once we file, especially with these allegations and requests, things will get adversarial quickly. Daniel will likely retaliate. I'm counting on it. After ending the call with Elise, I drove to our house, mind racing with all that needed to be done. I'd been living in a kind of suspension for days, limiting contact with Daniel while finalizing my plans. Now it was time for direct action. Daniel's car wasn't in the driveway when I arrived, a small mercy. I moved through the house efficiently, gathering important documents, family heirlooms, and personal items that held sentimental value. My grandmother's recipe box, photo albums from before my marriage, the first edition books my father had collected. I was in our bedroom packing clothing when I heard the front door open. Samantha, Daniel's voice called from downstairs. Your car's here. Are you home? I didn't answer, continuing to methodically fill a suitcase with essentials. His footsteps on the stairs, then the bedroom doorway filled with his presence. What are you doing? He asked, eyeing the open suitcases. Packing. I can see that. Why? Where are you going? I folded a sweater carefully before responding. Away from here. We agreed you wouldn't leave the house, he protested. Your lawyer specifically said. That was before you listed our house for sale without telling me. The color drained from his face. How did you... Does it matter? What matters is that even after being caught stealing our savings, even after promising transparency, you're still plotting behind my back. It's not what it looks like, he began, but I cut him off with a sharp laugh. It never is with you, is it, Daniel? The missing money wasn't theft, it was an investment. The house in Oakwood Hills wasn't for your girlfriend, it was a real estate opportunity. And now listing our home without my knowledge isn't deceptive, it's... What? Let me guess, exploring market options? He ran a hand through his hair, visibly calculating his next move. I was going to discuss it with you. I just wanted to gauge interest first, see what kind of offers we might attract. More lies, I said quietly, zipping the suitcase closed. You told the listing agent we were relocating for a job opportunity. You assured them spousal approval wasn't an issue. You were planning to present me with a fait accompli, just like you've done throughout our marriage. That's not fair. No, what's not fair is discovering that your husband of 15 years has been systematically betraying you on every possible level. I moved the suitcase to the floor and started filling another. Financial, emotional, legal. You've violated every aspect of our partnership. I made mistakes, he conceded, stepping further into the room. Serious ones. But I'm trying to make things right. I returned the money. I provided the statement about the main property. I ended things with Natalie. The last claim caught my attention. Did you? Yes, he insisted. It was a mistake, a midlife crisis or something. I told her it was over the day after you confronted me. Another lie to add to the growing collection. Rachel's contact had confirmed Daniel visited the Oakwood Hills property 3 times in the past week, staying for hours each visit. Interesting, I said, continuing to pack. So you're no longer seeing Natalie, no longer planning to move into... The Oakwood Hills house and listing our home was just an innocent market exploration. Have I summarized correctly? Yes, exactly. Relief flooded his features as he assumed I was accepting his explanation. I know I've lost your trust, but I'm committed to rebuilding it. I zipped the second suitcase and stood to face him, directly. Daniel, do you know what I find most disturbing about this entire situation? What? He asked cautiously. Your absolute confidence that you can continue lying to my face even after being caught repeatedly. The arrogance required to stand there and claim you've ended things with Natalie when you visited her multiple times this week alone. The audacity to pledge transparency while actively trying to sell our house behind my back. His expression hardened. You've been having me followed? I've been verifying what you tell me and finding deception at every turn. This is insane, he muttered. You're turning into some kind of obsessive. Careful, I warned. Consider your next words very carefully. We stood in tense silence, 15 years of marriage distilled into this moment of absolute disconnection. The man before me was a stranger wearing my husband's face, calculating, manipulative, fundamentally dishonest. What do you want, Samantha? He asked finally. Just tell me so we can move past this. What I want isn't something you can give me, I replied. I wanted a true partner, a relationship built on mutual respect and honesty. Apparently, that was never what we had. So you're leaving? Just like that? Not just like that. After much consideration and overwhelming evidence that you're still actively working against me. I lifted one of the suitcases. Elise will be contacting your attorney tomorrow. We're filing for divorce with temporary orders freezing all marital assets and prohibiting property transfers. You can't do that, he protested. I have deals in process, commitments. You should have thought of that before listing our house without my knowledge. I moved toward the door with the suitcase. He stepped into my path, expression dark. This is ridiculous. You're overreacting to a simple misunderstanding. Move, Daniel. Not until we resolve this. You can't. Just walk out and file court orders that will destroy everything I'm working on. Everything you're working on, I repeated. You mean your plans to sell our house, extract equity from the Oakwood Hills property, and likely disappear with as much money as possible? Those plans. His silence was confirmation enough. Last chance, I said quietly. Move out of my way. For a moment, I thought he might refuse, might escalate this into something uglier. Then he stepped aside, face rigid with suppressed anger. This isn't over, he said as I passed him. On that, I replied. We finally agree. I loaded my suitcases into the car and drove directly to the hotel I'd booked earlier that day. The confrontation had gone much as expected. Denials, then minimization, then anger when his manipulations failed. But there had been something in his expression at the end, something calculated and cold that left me unsettled. Daniel had spent our entire marriage compartmentalizing, maintaining separate versions of himself for different situations. I'd just threatened all of those carefully constructed compartments. I needed to be prepared for his reaction. In my hotel room, I called Rachel. How did it go? She asked immediately. About as expected. He denied everything until confronted with evidence, then got angry when his usual tactics didn't work. Did you tell him about Oakwood Hills? About your properties? Not yet. That revelation needs proper staging. I sank onto the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted. The closing is tomorrow. I want to wait until everything is official before making that particular announcement. Good call. And the divorce filing? Elise is preparing everything. We file first thing tomorrow with requests for temporary orders freezing assets. Rachel was quiet for a moment. Sam, I need to ask something. After tomorrow, after you own those properties and the divorce is filed, what's your plan for actually telling Daniel? Just springing it on him could be volatile. She wasn't wrong. Daniel's reaction when cornered today had revealed a harder edge than I'd witnessed before. I've been thinking about that, I admitted. Originally, I planned to simply wait until he noticed construction beginning on the surrounding lots. But, given his reaction today, a more controlled revelation might be prudent. What are you thinking? A formal meeting, neutral territory, perhaps with attorneys present. Wise, Rachel agreed. When? The day after closing, once everything is official and construction permits are filed. After ending the call with Rachel, I reached out to Elise to update her on the confrontation with Daniel and coordinate our next steps. She confirmed the divorce filing was prepared and would be submitted first thing in the morning, with an emergency hearing requested for the temporary orders. The judge assigned to your case is Elizabeth Haverford, Elise noted. She's known for taking financial misconduct in marriage very seriously. Given the evidence we have, I expect she'll grant the temporary orders promptly. Good. What should I expect from Daniel once he's served? Based on his pattern of behavior, I'd anticipate immediate outreach to his own attorney, attempts to contact you directly to explain or negotiate, and possibly efforts to move or hide additional assets before the orders take effect. He's already tried refinancing the Oakwood Hills property, I informed her. That's actually helpful for our case. It demonstrates ongoing bad faith and supports our request for comprehensive financial restraints. After confirming our strategy, for the following day I tried to relax, ordering room service and attempting to focus on a novel I'd brought with me. But my mind kept returning to what tomorrow would bring: the property closing, the divorce filing, the irrevocable steps that would permanently alter the course of my life. Was I making the right decisions? The scale of what I'd set in motion was momentous, financially, legally, emotionally. Was it justified response or self-destructive overreaction? My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. We need to talk. This has gone too far. I didn't respond. Another text followed. I've contacted an attorney. If you proceed with freezing assets, I'll be forced to take countermeasures. Threats now, predictable but still disappointing. A final message. Whatever you're planning, consider the consequences carefully. Some damages can't be undone. I stared at the words, a chill running through me. Not because I feared Daniel, but because I finally saw with perfect clarity the man I had married, someone who, when exposed and cornered, resorted to veiled threats rather than honesty and accountability. I slept fitfully, waking early to prepare for what promised to be a momentous day. By 8 a.m., I was dressed and on my way to meet Rachel and the Pinnacle Estates representatives for the closing. Thomas Pinnacle greeted us warmly in the conference room. The big day, he observed, shaking my hand. All paperwork is in order. We just need signatures and the wire transfer confirmation. The closing process was surprisingly anticlimactic, signing documents, initialing pages, watching as the financial portion was confirmed. By 9:37 a.m., it was official. I owned 5 prime lots in Oakwood Hills, completely surrounding 1420 Willow Creek Drive. Congratulations, Thomas said, handing me 5 sets of property documents. Construction permits have been expedited as requested. You can begin work as early as Monday. Perfect, I replied, the weight of what I'd done finally settling over me. I had committed nearly my entire personal savings and taken on substantial debt to execute this plan. There was no turning back now. As we left the Pinnacle Estates office, Rachel squeezed my arm. You okay? It's done, I said simply. Now for phase 2. We drove directly to the courthouse to meet Elise. The divorce filing was submitted by 10:45 a.m., with an emergency hearing on the temporary orders scheduled for 2 p.m. that afternoon. Remarkably fast, thanks to Elise's reputation and the compelling evidence of financial misconduct. Judge Haverford reviewed the initial filing and supporting documentation and expressed concern about the pattern of financial deception, Elise explained as we waited. She's particularly troubled by the attempted property transfer using a forged signature and the listing of your house without consent. Will Daniel be notified about today's hearing? I asked. His attorney has been informed and will be present. Whether Daniel himself attends is up to them, but not required at this stage. The hearing itself was brief but decisive. Judge Haverford, a stern woman in her 60s with penetrating eyes, listened to Elise's presentation of evidence, occasionally asking pointed questions. Daniel's attorney, a polished man named Gregory Phelps, attempted to characterize the financial issues as misunderstandings within the marriage, rather than deliberate misconduct. With all due respect, Judge Haverford interrupted his carefully worded explanation, forging a signature on a property transfer document is not a misunderstanding, nor is withdrawing $215,000 from joint accounts without spousal knowledge or consent, nor is listing a marital home for sale without disclosure to the co-owner. Your Honor, my client disputes some of these characterizations. The court has reviewed Mrs. Reed's evidence, including bank records, the notarized statement regarding the forgery and the unauthorized property listing. The pattern is clear. She turned to look directly at me. Mrs. Reed, the court grants your request for temporary orders freezing all marital assets pending further proceedings. Mr. Reed is hereby prohibited from transferring, encumbering, concealing, or disposing of any property constituting marital assets, without express written consent from you or further order of this court. Relief washed over me. Phase 2 complete. Outside the courtroom, Elise was measured but pleased. This is an excellent start. The temporary orders provide immediate protection, while we proceed with the forensic accounting and formal discovery process. When will Daniel be formally notified? His attorney received copies of everything today. He'll be served with the divorce petition and temporary orders by end of business day. She checked her watch. Likely within the next few hours. Good. I need to prepare for his reaction. And there would be a reaction. Of that I was certain. Daniel had just lost control of the narrative, the finances, and his carefully constructed exit strategy. His response would be swift and potentially volatile. But for the first time since discovering his betrayal, I felt I had the upper hand. The properties were mine. The court had acknowledged his misconduct. And tomorrow, in a carefully orchestrated meeting, he would learn the full extent of my countermove. That his betrayed wife now owned every piece of land surrounding his dream home, with construction set to begin on Monday. The board had been reset. The game was changing, and Daniel Reed was about to discover he'd severely underestimated his opponent. The calls started at 4:18 p.m. Daniel first, then his attorney, then Daniel again. I let them all go to voicemail, listening to the messages in the safety of my hotel room. Samantha, what the hell is this? Daniel's voice was tight with barely controlled rage. Temporary orders? Asset freezes? Call me immediately. His attorney was more measured, but equally urgent. Mrs. Reed, this is Gregory Phelps. I'm representing your husband in this matter. I believe we could resolve many of these issues without further court involvement if you would be willing to meet and discuss terms. Please contact my office at your earliest convenience. Daniel's second message abandoned all pretense of control. You've crossed a line, Samantha. You have no idea what you've done. Whatever game you're playing, it stops now. Call me back. Or I'm coming to your office. I forwarded the messages to Elise, who responded immediately. Standard intimidation tactics. Do not engage directly. All communication should go through me now. As evening fell, I ordered room service and set up my laptop on the small desk by the window. Rachel had sent the finalized architectural plans for my Oakwood Hills properties, and Vivian had included a digital walkthrough showing how the structures would look once completed. I watched as the animation panned around the 5 lots, showing how the buildings would effectively surround and diminish 1420 Willow Creek Drive. The main residence on Lot 18 was elegant without being ostentatious. Modern lines, large windows, a design that worked with the hillside rather than dominating it. The structures on the other lots were strategically positioned to impact Daniel and Natalie's property while serving plausible purposes. The guest house blocking their western view, the art studio eliminating morning light, the tennis court with Night illumination positioned precisely to shine into their master bedroom, and the community pavilion ensuring no privacy in their backyard. It was comprehensive, calculated, perhaps excessive. Was I going too far? My phone rang again, Rachel this time. "Have you heard from Daniel?" she asked without preamble. "Several messages. I haven't responded." "Good. Keep it that way. His attorney just called a colleague at my firm trying to get information about your recent real estate transactions." I sat up straighter. "They're suspicious about the properties?" "Not specifically. They seem to be casting a wide net looking for any financial moves you've made recently. Standard procedure when facing asset freezes. They want to argue you've been hiding assets too." "The properties were purchased with my personal funds, maintained separately throughout our marriage," I reminded her. "True, but that won't stop them from trying to claim their marital assets subject to division, especially once they realize what those properties are and what you're planning to do with them." She was right. Once Daniel discovered my ownership of the surrounding lots, he would undoubtedly try to claim entitlement to them or seek to prevent my planned construction. "Should we accelerate the timeline?" I asked. "Move up the meeting to tomorrow morning instead of waiting another day?" Rachel was quiet for a moment. "Maybe. Daniel's reaction to the divorce filing and temporary orders is more aggressive than we anticipated. The sooner he understands the full situation, the sooner his attorney can guide him toward a reasonable settlement." After ending the call with Rachel, I messaged Elise about moving up the Revelation meeting. She agreed it was prudent given Daniel's response so far, and suggested her office as a secure location with the necessary resources to manage potential volatility. 9 a.m. tomorrow, she confirmed. "I'll arrange for a security officer to be present, just as a precaution. I'll also notify Mr. Phelps that you're willing to meet to discuss settlement options." With tomorrow's meeting set, I tried to relax, but sleep remained elusive. I kept thinking about Daniel's voice in those messages, the shock, the outrage, the underlying threat. He'd never spoken to me that way before. It was as if the mask had finally dropped completely, revealing someone I'd never truly known, despite 15 years of marriage. Morning arrived with a flurry of texts from unknown numbers. Friends of Daniel's, I presumed, recruited to reach out when he couldn't contact me directly. Each conveyed some variation of, "Daniel is devastated," or "There must be a misunderstanding," or "You're making a terrible mistake." I blocked each number methodically and prepared for the meeting, choosing a steel gray suit that projected both authority and restraint. At 8:30 a.m., I arrived at Elise's office to review our strategy one final time. "Daniel and his attorney are confirmed for 9 a.m., she said, handing me a coffee. "I've prepared a conference room with all the relevant documentation displayed. Rachel is bringing the property records and architectural plans." "And the security officer?" "Stationed outside the conference room, discreet but available if needed." She studied my face. "How are you holding up?" "I haven't slept much," I admitted, "but I'm clear on what needs to happen today." Rachel arrived a few minutes later, carrying a portfolio of property documents and architectural renderings. "I've also got the construction permits that were approved yesterday," she said, spreading the materials on the conference table. "Excavation is scheduled to begin Monday morning on lots 17 and 19, the ones directly flanking Daniel's property." At precisely 9 a.m., the receptionist announced Daniel and Gregory Phelps had arrived. I took a deep breath, centering myself as Elise went to escort them in. Daniel entered first, his normally impeccable appearance showing signs of strain. Shirt slightly rumpled, jaw tight with tension. His eyes locked onto mine immediately, a mixture of anger and confusion evident in his expression. His attorney followed, polished and professional in contrast to his client's barely contained emotion. "Samantha," Daniel began, but Elise smoothly intervened. "Let's all take a seat," she suggested, gesturing to the conference table. "We have several matters to discuss." Daniel reluctantly complied, his gaze never leaving my face as everyone arranged themselves around the table. I maintained a neutral expression, determined not to show the turmoil I felt seeing him again after our confrontation. "Before we begin," Gregory Phelps said, opening his briefcase, "I want to express my client's willingness to resolve these matters amicably. The temporary orders obtained yesterday were, in our view, an excessive response to what are essentially private financial decisions within a marriage." Elise's smile didn't reach her eyes. Private financial decisions like forging a spouse's signature on property transfer documents, or secretly listing a marital home for sale without the co-owner's knowledge, or perhaps you're referring to the systematic withdrawal of over $215,000 from joint accounts to purchase a property for Mr. Reed's paramour? Daniel flinched at the word paramour, but his attorney remained composed. "My client acknowledges certain communication failures regarding financial matters," Phelps conceded carefully. "However, the characterization of events in your court filings is disputed. We're prepared to offer—" "Before we discuss offers," I interrupted, speaking for the first time, "there's additional information that will impact any potential settlement negotiations." Daniel leaned forward. "What information?" I nodded to Rachel, who slid a folder across the table. "Property records for lots 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20 in the Oakwood Hills development." Daniel stared at the folder without opening it. "What about them?" "They surround 1420 Willow Creek Drive," I said evenly. "The property you purchased with our joint savings." His brow furrowed. "I don't understand." "I own them," I clarified. "All 5 lots surrounding the house you bought for Natalie." The color drained from Daniel's face as he finally opened the folder, examining the property records with growing disbelief. "This is impossible," he muttered. How did you—" "The closing was finalized yesterday," Rachel supplied. "Construction begins Monday." Daniel looked up sharply. "Construction? What construction?" Rachel slid the architectural renderings across the table. "A primary residence on Lot 18, directly across from your property. Guest house on Lot 17, positioned to block your western views. Art studio on Lot 19, eliminating morning light. Tennis court with night illumination on Lot 20, and a community pavilion on Lot 16. "You can't do this," Daniel said, voice rising as he flipped through the renderings. This is harassment." "It's property development," I corrected, calmly. "All structures comply with HOA regulations and zoning requirements." Gregory Phelps, visibly struggling to process this new information, attempted to regain control of the situation. "These properties, when were they purchased? With what funds?" "With Mrs. Reed's personal funds," Elise answered. "Funds maintained separately throughout the marriage and unknown to Mr. Reed. The purchase was conducted through Horizon Properties LLC, with Mrs. Reed as the sole owner." "You used separate funds to deliberately diminish a marital asset," Phelps argued. "That's acting in bad faith during a pending divorce." "The properties were purchased before divorce proceedings began," Elise countered. "And given Mr. Reed's documented history of financial misconduct, including attempts to hide and dissipate marital assets, his position on bad faith is tenuous at best." Daniel pushed the renderings away, face flushed with anger. "This is insane. You're spending, what, millions? Just to spite me?" "I'm investing in real estate," I replied, maintaining my composure. "The fact that these particular properties impact the value and enjoyment of 1420 Willow Creek Drive is coincidental." "Bullshit," Daniel snapped, mask slipping completely. "This is vindictive, and you know it." "Perhaps," I acknowledged, "but no more vindictive than stealing our life savings to build a future with your mistress. No more vindictive than forging my signature to steal family property. No more vindictive than secretly listing our home for sale while lying to my face about wanting to save our marriage." Gregory Phelps placed a restraining hand on Daniel's arm as he opened his mouth to respond. I think we need to step back and reassess our position given this new information, the attorney said carefully. May we have the room for a few minutes? Elise nodded. Of course. We'll wait in my office. As we left the conference room, I caught a glimpse of Daniel's face, shock giving way to calculation as he whispered urgently to his attorney. He was already formulating a counter-strategy. I'd expected nothing less. In Elise's office, Rachel let out a long breath. Well, that was intense. It went as expected, Elise observed. Initial shock, then anger, then strategic retreat to regroup. Now they'll try to find a way to claim those properties as marital assets or prevent the construction. Can they? I asked. It will be difficult, Elise assured me. The separate nature of the funds used, the timing of the purchase, the legitimate business structure, all work in our favor. But they'll try. 15 minutes later, Gregory Phelps requested our return. Daniel sat stone-faced at the table, his earlier anger now masked behind a facade of business-like detachment. After consideration, Phelps began, my client is prepared to offer a comprehensive settlement that would resolve all outstanding issues, including the Oakwood Hills properties. We're listening, Elise said. Mr. Reed proposes the following. He will quitclaim any interest in your joint home to Mrs. Reed. He will transfer the full $222,895 that was returned to joint accounts directly to Mrs. Reed's personal account. He will assume all tax liabilities related to the early liquidation of certain investments used for the Oakwood Hills purchase. And in exchange, Elise prompted, Mrs. Reed will quitclaim any interest in the 1420 Willow Creek property to Mr. Reed. She will transfer ownership of lots 16, 17, 19, and 20 to Mr. Reed, retaining only lot 18 for her personal residence if desired. And she will agree to a confidentiality clause regarding all matters pertaining to their marriage and its dissolution. I almost laughed at the audacity. Daniel had stolen our savings, and now he expected me to hand over 4 prime properties I'd purchased with my separate funds, while also agreeing to keep silent about his misconduct. That's not a settlement offer, I said before Elise could respond. That's a continuation of the same pattern. Daniel taking what isn't his and expecting me to facilitate it. Daniel leaned forward, dropping the businesslike pretense. Be reasonable, Samantha. What are you going to do with 5 lots in Oakwood Hills? You don't have the resources to develop them all. This way, we both get something we want. What I want, I replied evenly, is accountability, consequences for actions, something you've managed to avoid your entire life, apparently. And this, he gestured to the architectural plans, surrounding my property with structures specifically designed to diminish its value. This is about accountability? This is about punishment. Perhaps it's both, I acknowledged. Just as your theft of our savings was both a financial decision and a profound betrayal. Gregory Phelps intervened, clearly sensing his client's rising anger. Perhaps we could focus on a more equitable division. Mrs. Reed retains the marital home and the $222 dues $895, plus an additional sum to compensate for emotional distress. Mr. Reed retains 1420 Willow Creek, and the surrounding lots are divided between them with appropriate buffers ensuring reasonable enjoyment of both properties. It was a more balanced proposal, one that might have seemed reasonable a week ago. But I'd moved beyond seeking reasonable compromises. No, I said simply. Daniel's composure fractured. This is ridiculous. You're spending millions out of spite, turning a divorce into all-out war. For what? To teach me a lesson? Not just a lesson, I corrected. A consequence. Something you apparently never anticipated when you started siphoning our savings. When you purchased a home for your girlfriend. When you forged my signature on legal documents. When you listed our house behind my back. So what's your counteroffer? Phelps asked, trying to steer the conversation back to negotiation. I looked at Elise, who nodded slightly, indicating we'd discussed this possibility. Mr. Reed surrenders all claim to the marital home and contents, I began. He transfers an additional $100,000 to compensate for legal fees and financial damages resulting from his misconduct. He provides a full accounting of all accounts, investments, and properties acquired during our marriage, with penalties for any undisclosed assets discovered later. And the Oakwood Hills properties? Phelps prompted. I retain all 5 lots and proceed with construction as planned. Daniel slammed his hand on the table. That's not a negotiation. You're asking me to hand over everything while you deliberately destroy the value of my property. Your property, I repeated, purchased with stolen funds. Funds you took from our joint accounts while planning your exit from our marriage. The money has been returned, Phelps interjected. Only after he was caught, I pointed out. Only after being confronted with evidence. Only after realizing there would be legal consequences if he didn't. Daniel stood abruptly. This is going nowhere. If you want war, Samantha, you've got it. But remember, you started this. No, Daniel, I replied calmly. You started this the moment you decided our marriage vows and joint finances were obstacles, to be circumvented rather than commitments to be honored. After Daniel and his attorney left, the conference room felt suddenly quiet. I exhaled slowly, releasing tension I hadn't realized I'd been holding. That went about as expected, Elise observed. They'll return to court now, likely filing motions, to try and claim the Oakwood Hills properties as marital assets, subject to division. Will they succeed? Rachel asked. Unlikely, Elise said. The separate nature of the funds and the timing of the purchase are strong factors in our favor, but they'll try to delay the construction through injunctions and emergency hearings. Which is why we need to move quickly, I decided. Rachel, can we accelerate the construction timeline? Begin work tomorrow instead of Monday? Rachel considered the question. Possibly. I'd need to contact the contractors immediately. Weekend rates would apply, increasing costs significantly. Do it, I authorized. I want obvious, visible work underway before they can file for any injunctions. The rest of the day passed in a flurry of calls and arrangements. Rachel coordinated with contractors to begin preliminary site work the following morning. Elise prepared responses to the motions she anticipated from Daniel's attorney. I transferred additional funds to cover the increased construction costs. By evening, everything was arranged. Excavation equipment would arrive at lots 17 and 19, the properties directly flanking 1420 Willow Creek Drive, by 7 a.m. the next morning. Survey stakes would be placed, marking the exact positioning of the structures designed to impact Daniel and Natalie's property. As I returned to my hotel room that night, exhaustion finally overcame the adrenaline that had carried me through the day. The confrontation with Daniel, the rejection of settlement offers, the acceleration of construction plans, all had taken a toll. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Despite my better judgment, I opened it. A photo appeared, Daniel and Natalie, standing in front of 1420 Willow Creek Drive, champagne glasses raised toward the camera. The timestamp showed it was taken just hours after our meeting. A message followed. You're not the only one who can accelerate timelines. Moving in tomorrow. Enjoy your view while it lasts. So that was his counter-move, abandoning any pretense, fully embracing his relationship with Natalie, moving into the house immediately to establish residence before court hearings. A tactical adjustment to match my own. I forwarded the message to Elise with a brief note. Daniel's response. How does this impact our strategy? Her reply came quickly. It actually helps our case, demonstrates his true priorities, and undermines any claim that the property was purchased as an investment. Document everything. Forward any additional communication. I blocked the number and set my phone aside, suddenly too tired to feel any further anger or outrage. Daniel was showing his true self now, without reservation. Whatever remained of our marriage, whatever illusions I might have still harbored about reconciliation or amicable resolution, had dissolved completely. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new legal maneuvers, new attempts by Daniel to regain control of a situation rapidly slipping beyond his grasp. But tonight, I allowed myself a moment of somber recognition for what had been lost, not just in the past weeks of discovery and confrontation, but throughout 15 years of a marriage that had apparently been built on shifting sand rather than solid foundation. The tactical adjustments had been made. The pieces were in motion. There would be no turning back now for either of us. Dawn broke with the distant rumble of heavy machinery. I stood at my hotel window, coffee in hand, watching the early morning traffic below while listening to Rachel's live update from Oakwood Hills. Excavators are in position at lots 17 and 19, she reported. Survey stakes are set. We've got concrete trucks scheduled for foundation work this afternoon. Any sign of Daniel or Natalie? Not yet, but several neighbors have come out to watch. Word travels fast in developments like this. I checked my watch. 6:45 a.m. I'll be there by 8. Has Elise heard anything from Phelps? Nothing yet, but she's expecting emergency motions to be filed when the courts open at 9. After finishing the call, I dressed quickly and practical. Clothes, dark jeans, a lightweight sweater, boots suitable for a construction site. Today would be about visibility, about making sure Daniel and everyone else in Oakwood Hills understood exactly what was happening. The development looked different in daylight, more exposed, less impressive than it had seemed during my previous visits. As I drove toward 1420 Willow Creek Drive, the sound of construction equipment grew louder. Rounding the final curve, I saw the full tableau. Bright yellow excavators digging foundation trenches on both sides of Daniel's property, workers in hard hats placing rebar, survey teams marking boundaries with neon-colored flags. Rachel waved from beside her car, tablet in hand as she consulted with a man in a construction vest. I parked behind her and made my way carefully across the dirt. Sam, this is Eduardo Vasquez, our site manager, Rachel introduced us. He's expedited crews for both lots simultaneously. Eduardo nodded respectfully. Ms. Reed, we've marked the foundations exactly according to the architectural plans. The guest house on Lot 17 will be positioned precisely to block the western views, and the art studio on Lot 19 will impact morning light as requested. Perfect. I surveyed the activity with satisfaction. How quickly can we get visible structures in place? Foundation pours today. Prefabricated wall sections could begin arriving Monday. We could have basic framing in place by Wednesday, weather permitting. Excellent. And the other lots? Survey teams will stake lots 16 and 20 this afternoon. We can begin excavation there on Monday as planned. A commotion at the edge of the property drew my attention. Daniel's black SUV had pulled up, and he was storming toward us, Natalie hurrying to keep pace behind him. Her face was a mixture of confusion and alarm, suggesting she might not have fully understood the situation until this moment. Time for the fireworks, Rachel murmured. I straightened my posture and turned to face my husband, maintaining a composed expression as he approached. What the hell is this? Daniel demanded, gesturing wildly at the construction equipment. Natalie hovered, a few steps behind him, designer sunglasses failing to hide her distress. Construction, I replied simply. As I mentioned yesterday, work is beginning on my properties. You can't do this, he insisted, lowering his voice as several workers turned to watch the confrontation. This is harassment. My attorney is filing for emergency injunctions this morning. The courts open at 9, I noted, checking my watch. It seems we've gotten an early start. Natalie stepped forward, removing her sunglasses. Mrs. Reed, please. This house. It's our dream. Home. Why would you do this? The genuine bewilderment in her voice caught me off guard. What exactly had Daniel told her about our marriage, about our finances, about how he'd acquired the funds for this house? Ms. Winters, did Daniel explain that he purchased this dream home with money taken from our joint savings? Money we'd spent 15 years accumulating for our retirement? Her eyes widened, darting to Daniel. You said the money was from your investment account. You said your wife knew about the withdrawal. Daniel's jaw tightened. Natalie, this isn't the time. Did he mention forging my signature to try and steal family property? I continued. Or secretly listing our marital home for sale without my knowledge? Natalie paled visibly. Daniel? She's twisting everything, he insisted, taking her arm. We can discuss this privately. Let's go. But Natalie pulled away, taking a step back. You promised me everything was above board. You said this was your money, your property. It was joint money, I clarified. Money we saved together. Money I earned every bit as much as he did. Eduardo cleared his throat awkwardly. Ms. Reed, the concrete trucks are arriving. We need direction on the foundation elevations. Of course, I nodded. Rachel can show you the specifications. As they moved away, Daniel stepped closer, voice dropping to an urgent whisper. Samantha, you've made your point. This display of power, this revenge, it's beneath you. I thought I was simply making an investment just like you did. His expression hardened. You won't get away with this. The courts won't allow it. The courts are unlikely to interfere with legitimate construction on privately owned property, I countered, especially given your documented history of financial misconduct. Natalie had retreated to Daniel's SUV, her body language suggesting acute discomfort with the unfolding situation. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. You're not just hurting me, Daniel said, changing tactics. You're destroying property values for everyone in this development. The neighbors will turn against you. As if on cue, an older couple approached, from a nearby house, curiosity evident in their expressions. Excuse me, the man called. We're the Harrises from 1418. Is everything all right? There seems to be quite a commotion this morning. Perfect timing. I stepped toward them with an extended hand. Samantha Reed. I'm the new owner of lots 16 through 20. I apologize for the early start, but we're eager to begin development. Mrs. Harris shook my hand. Oh, we didn't realize those lots had sold. What are you building? A primary residence on Lot 18, with complementary structures on the surrounding properties. My architect has designed everything to maximize the natural features of the hillside. How wonderful, she smiled, then glanced toward Daniel with mild confusion. And you are? Daniel's professional mask slipped into place with practice. Daniel Reed, owner of 1420. Samantha is my wife, though we're currently separated. Mr. Harris's eyebrows rose. I see. Well, that's unusual. Isn't it? I agreed pleasantly. Would you like to see the architectural renderings? They're quite impressive. As I guided the Harrises toward Rachel and the site plans, leaving Daniel standing alone, I caught a glimpse of his expression, a mixture of fury and dawning realization that this situation had spiraled far beyond his ability to control through charm or manipulation. By mid-morning, word had spread throughout the development. Residents from nearby properties wandered over to observe the construction and inquire about plans. I greeted each one cordially, sharing the architectural renderings, explaining the timeline, never explicitly mentioning that the designs were specifically created to diminish 1420 Willow Creek Drive, but letting the plans speak for themselves. Daniel and Natalie had retreated into the house, though I occasionally spotted them watching from windows. At 10:37 a.m., Elise called. Phelps filed for emergency injunctions as expected, she reported. Hearing scheduled for Monday at 2 p.m. Judge Haverford will preside. Will construction need to stop until then? No. The motion requests a pause, but without a signed order, you can proceed. And given what we know of Judge Haverford, I think our position is strong. Good. What arguments are they making? Primary claim is that you're acting in bad faith by deliberately diminishing a marital asset. Secondary arguments include accusations of harassment and intentional infliction of emotional distress. She paused. They're also claiming the funds used to purchase the properties should be considered marital assets, despite being in your separate account. As expected. They've included photographs of the construction activity this morning as evidence of urgent and irreparable harm to their property interests. I watched as concrete trucks positioned themselves to begin pouring foundations. How ironic that Daniel's now concerned about harm to property interests. Indeed. I've prepared our response emphasizing his pattern of financial misconduct, the separate nature of your funds, and the legitimate investment purpose of your purchases. Will you need me at Monday's hearing? Your presence would be helpful, yes. The more Judge Haverford sees you as the reasonable, business-minded party contrasted with Daniel's emotional reactions, the better. After ending the call, I rejoined Rachel by the construction site. The concrete pour had begun on Lot 17, the foundation taking shape for the guest house strategically positioned to block Daniel's western views. Legal challenges? Rachel asked. As expected. Hearing Monday. We should have significant progress by then, she noted. Eduardo says they can work through the weekend at premium rates. Approved, I decided. The more established the construction before the hearing, the stronger our position. Around noon, Daniel emerged from the house again, this time alone. He approached with measured steps, his expression carefully neutral. I braced myself for another confrontation, but his tone when he reached me was surprisingly conciliatory. Can we talk privately? He asked. I glanced at Rachel, who nodded her willingness to stay within eyesight. Briefly. We moved to a spot between our properties, far enough from workers to speak without being overheard. I've been thinking about your offer yesterday, Daniel began. I may have been hasty in my rejection. You seemed quite decisive at the time. Emotions were running high. He gestured toward the construction. This display has made your position clear. It's not a display, Daniel. It's development of legally purchased property. Call it what you want, he conceded with a tight smile. The point is, I'm willing to reconsider terms. You keep the marital home and the returned funds. I keep 1420, Willow Creek. And we find a compromise on these surrounding lots that doesn't involve deliberately diminishing my property value. The sudden reversal was suspicious. What prompted this change of heart? Let's just say Natalie and I have had some clarifying discussions this morning about the source of funds for this house. So that was it. Natalie, upon learning the full truth, was having second thoughts. The dream home built on stolen money was losing its luster. I'm afraid the time for that compromise has passed, I said. Construction has begun. Contracts are signed. Plans are in motion. Daniel's facade of reasonableness cracked slightly. This isn't just about money anymore, is it? This is about humiliation, about making a point. Perhaps it's about consequences, I suggested. About recognizing that actions have repercussions that can't always be negotiated away with charm and strategic concessions. We stood in silence for a moment, the sounds of construction filling the space between us. In Daniel's eyes, I saw something I'd never witnessed before, genuine uncertainty. For perhaps the first time in our marriage, he couldn't see a path to manipulating the situation to his advantage. We could have had everything, he said finally, if you'd just been more attentive, more present in our marriage. Don't, I cut him off sharply. Don't try to rewrite history to make your betrayal my fault. You made choices, Daniel. Deliberate, calculated choices to steal what we'd built together. His expression hardened. and now you're making choices too. Remember that on Monday when we're in court." As he walked back toward 1420 Willow Creek Drive, I noticed Natalie watching from the front window, her expression unreadable behind the glass. Whatever narrative Daniel had constructed for her was unraveling, just as our marriage had. By late Thursday afternoon, the foundations on both adjacent lots were poured, survey stakes marked the boundaries of the tennis court on Lot 20, and preliminary excavation had begun for the community pavilion on Lot 16. The development had transformed into a buzzing construction zone centered around Daniel's property. As I prepared to leave, Eduardo approached with updated timelines. "Wall sections arrive Monday morning. We'll have basic framing visible by the time of your court hearing. The structures will be clearly defined by then." "Excellent work," I approved, signing off on the weekend overtime authorization. Driving away from Oakwood Hills that evening, I felt a complicated mixture of emotions: satisfaction at the progress, vindication at Daniel's evident distress, but also a hollow recognition of how completely our marriage had disintegrated. Tomorrow would bring more construction, more visibility, more evidence of my counter-move taking physical form around Daniel's stolen dream home. Monday would bring legal challenges and judicial assessment. The decisive showdown was fully engaged now, not just in court documents or property records, but in concrete and steel rising from the ground, in physical structures that would permanently alter the landscape of Oakwood Hills and serve as lasting reminders of consequences too significant to be charmed away or negotiated into oblivion. The weekend passed in a blur of construction activity. I divided my time between the Oakwood Hills site and meetings with Elise to prepare for Monday's hearing. By Sunday evening, the foundations on all 5 lots had been poured, and the prefabricated wall sections for the guest house on Lot 17 had been delivered ahead of schedule, ready for installation first thing Monday morning. Daniel and Natalie remained largely secluded inside 1420 Willow Creek Drive, emerging only occasionally to survey the rapidly advancing construction with evident dismay. Twice I noticed them in heated discussion on their back patio, Natalie's animated gestures suggesting growing disillusionment with their situation. Monday morning dawned clear and bright. I arrived at Oakwood Hills by 7 a.m. to find the construction crews already assembling the first wall sections. By noon, the basic frame of the guest house on Lot 17 stood clearly visible from Daniel's property, a physical manifestation of my promise that his actions would have consequences. "Impressive progress," Rachel commented as we walked the perimeter of the construction sites. "2 more days and the structures will be unmistakably defined." "Just in time for the second hearing, if needed," I noted, checking my watch. "We should head downtown. Court's at 2. The courthouse corridors bustled with afternoon activity as Elise guided me toward Judge Haverford's courtroom. Daniel and Gregory Phelps were already seated at the plaintiff's table, heads bent in urgent conversation. I noticed Natalie was absent, an interesting choice given Daniel's previous insistence that they were building a life together. Judge Haverford entered promptly at 2 p.m., her stern demeanor unchanged from our previous appearance. She surveyed the assembled parties with piercing eyes before addressing the court. "We're here on an emergency motion filed by Mr. Reed seeking injunctive relief to halt construction on properties adjacent to 1420 Willow Creek Drive in the Oakwood Hills development. Mr. Phelps, you may present your case." Daniel's attorney rose, straightening his tie. "Your Honor, this is a clear case of a spouse using separate funds to deliberately diminish the value of what should be considered a marital asset. The timing and nature of Mrs. Reed's property purchases and subsequent construction activities demonstrate malicious intent to damage Mr. Reed's property interests." He presented photographs of the weekend's construction, emphasizing the strategic positioning of the structures. "As you can see, Your Honor, these buildings are specifically designed to block views, eliminate privacy, and otherwise impair the use and enjoyment of my client's property." Judge Haverford reviewed the photographs with a neutral expression. And your argument that these properties purchased with Mrs. Reed's separate funds should be considered marital assets? Mrs. Reed maintained these separate accounts secretly throughout the marriage, Your Honor. Their existence was never disclosed to Mr. Reed, which we contend constitutes a form of financial concealment not dissimilar to what Mrs. Reed has accused my client of doing. I stiffened at this false equivalence, but Elise patted my arm reassuringly. Furthermore, Phelps continued, the clear intent to diminish a property purchased with marital funds represents action taken in bad faith during pending divorce proceedings. Judge Haverford turned to Elise. Counselor? Elise rose confidently. Your Honor, there are several critical distinctions that Mr. Phelps conveniently overlooks. First, Mrs. Reed's separate account was established prior to marriage and maintained throughout with her separate funds, primarily portions of work bonuses and small inheritances. This is fundamentally different from Mr. Reed's documented pattern of secretly withdrawing funds from joint accounts. She presented documentation of my account history, highlighting its long-standing nature. Second, the property at 1420 Willow Creek Drive was purchased with misappropriated funds that Mr. Reed took without Mrs. Reed's knowledge or consent, funds he has since been required to return. Judge Haverford nodded. And regarding the construction activities, Mrs. Reed purchased these properties as legitimate investments before divorce proceedings began. The architectural designs comply fully with all HOA regulations and zoning requirements. The fact that these designs may impact the value or enjoyment of 1420 Willow Creek Drive does not constitute legal grounds for injunctive relief, particularly given Mr. Reed's documented history of financial misconduct. Judge Haverford considered both arguments, reviewing the documents before her. The courtroom remained silent, tension building as she formulated her decision. Having reviewed the evidence and arguments presented, she began, I find insufficient grounds for emergency injunctive relief. Mrs. Reed's purchases were made with separate funds maintained throughout the marriage. The construction activities comply with all applicable regulations and were initiated before divorce proceedings commenced. Daniel's face darkened as she continued. Furthermore, Mr. Reed's history of financial misconduct, including unauthorized withdrawals from joint accounts and attempted forgery of Mrs. Reed's signature on property documents, significantly weakens his position when claiming Mrs. Reed has acted in bad faith. She closed the file decisively. The motion for emergency injunctive relief is denied. Construction may continue as planned. However, she added, raising a finger, I caution both. Parties that continued escalation of property disputes will not be viewed favorably by this court. I strongly encourage serious settlement discussions before our next scheduled hearing. Outside the courtroom, Elise couldn't hide her satisfaction. That went exactly as I hoped. Haverford saw right through their attempt to equate your separate account with Daniel's theft from joint funds. Daniel and Phelps emerged shortly after, Daniel's expression thunderous. He approached, despite his attorney's attempt to steer him toward the elevators. Congratulations, he said, voice tight with controlled anger. You've won this round. I hope the victory feels worth what it's costing you. What exactly is it? Costing me, Daniel? I asked calmly. Money, time, energy, our marriage. Our marriage ended the moment you decided to steal our savings to build a future with someone else, I countered. Everything since has simply been about accountability. Phelps finally succeeded in guiding Daniel away, but not before Daniel called back. This isn't over, Samantha. Not by a long shot. Despite his bravado, I could see the calculation in his eyes had changed. The legal avenues to stop my construction were narrowing. His leverage was diminishing with each passing day. As predicted, the next 2 weeks brought dramatic changes to Oakwood Hills. The guest house and art studio structures flanking 1420 Willow Creek Drive took clear shape, their strategic positioning now unmistakable to anyone viewing the properties. The tennis court foundation was completed, lighting poles installed precisely where they would shine into Daniel's master bedroom windows. The community pavilion began to rise behind his property, positioned to eliminate any privacy in his backyard. Surprisingly, no further legal challenges materialized. Instead, on a Wednesday afternoon as I supervised the installation of windows in the guest house, a silver luxury sedan I didn't recognize pulled into the cul-de-sac. Natalie emerged alone, dressed more conservatively than I'd seen previously, her expression determined as she approached. "Mrs. Reed," she began formally, "may I speak with you privately?" Curious, I nodded to Rachel that everything was under control and guided Natalie to a quieter area away from the construction noise. "I want to apologize," she said without preamble. "When Daniel and I began our relationship, he told me he was separated, that his marriage was essentially over. By the time I learned otherwise, I was." She hesitated, emotionally invested. "And the house?" I prompted. "Did he tell you how he acquired the funds for it?" She looked away, clearly uncomfortable. "He said it was his investment money, that he'd been planning this move for years. I never questioned it until I saw your reaction that first day of construction. And now? Now I've done my own research. I've seen the court documents. I understand what really happened." She met my gaze directly. "I've ended our relationship. I'm moving out today." This was unexpected. "I appreciate you telling me this, but why?" "Because I think you should know that your actions had their intended effect. Not just on Daniel, but on me too." She glanced toward the construction. What you've done here, it made me realize I didn't want to build a life with someone capable of what Daniel did. I didn't want a relationship founded on theft and lies." I wasn't sure how to respond. I hadn't anticipated Natalie showing this level of principle or self-awareness. "There's something else you should know," she continued. "Daniel's been trying to refinance the property again, using my credit this time since his assets are frozen. When I refused, She hesitated again. "He what?" "He suggested selling the property quickly, at a loss if necessary, and relocating overseas. He mentioned accounts in the Cayman Islands." My breath caught. This confirmed my suspicions about his long-term planning, the research into international banking I'd discovered in his emails. "Thank you for telling me this," I said, already planning to alert Elise immediately. Natalie nodded, then turned to leave before pausing. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not just for my part in this, but for what he did to you. 15 years is a long time to invest in someone who could betray you so completely." As she drove away, I stood watching the construction progress around 1420 Willow Creek Drive, the physical manifestation of consequences that had achieved more than I'd anticipated. Not just financial impact or property devaluation, but the collapse of Daniel's carefully constructed exit strategy and the loss of the relationship he'd sacrificed our marriage to pursue. That evening, I shared Natalie's information with Elise, who immediately filed additional motions to prevent any attempt by Daniel to sell the Oakwood Hills property or transfer assets overseas. Judge Haverford, already familiar with Daniel's pattern of financial misconduct, granted the motions without requiring a hearing. 2 days later, Phelps contacted Elise with a settlement offer that suggested Daniel finally recognized his position was untenable. He would surrender all claim to our marital home and contents, transfer an additional $150,000 in damages and legal fees, provide full financial disclosure under penalty of perjury, and request no interest in my Oakwood Hills properties. In exchange, I would permit him to sell 1420 Willow Creek Drive without interference and keep any proceeds after repayment of the mortgage. I would also agree to expedited divorce proceedings to conclude the matter quickly. "It's a reasonable offer," Elise acknowledged as we discussed it in her office. "Better than I expected, honestly. The question is it enough?" I considered the question carefully. The construction surrounding 1420 Willow Creek Drive had progressed significantly, each structure now clearly defined in its impact on Daniel's property. My point had been made. The consequences were visible, tangible, and undeniable. Yes, I decided finally. It's enough. I've achieved what I set out to do. The settlement agreement was formalized the following week. Daniel attended the signing meeting but avoided direct interaction, his normally confident demeanor noticeably subdued. The man who had once dominated every room with charm and self-assurance now seemed diminished. His calculated world collapsed around him. As he left the conference room, he paused at the door. "I hope it was worth it," he said without turning. "All of this, the properties, the construction, the legal battles, I hope the satisfaction lasts." I considered his words before responding. It wasn't about satisfaction, Daniel. It was about consequences, about ensuring you understood that some betrayals can't be charmed away or negotiated into oblivion. He nodded almost imperceptibly before walking out of my life for the final time. The legal paperwork concluding our marriage was finalized. 30 days later, a surprisingly brief epilogue to 15 years together. I received notification while monitoring construction on what would become my primary residence on Lot 18 in Oakwood Hills, directly across from 1420 Willow Creek Drive. Rachel joined me that afternoon, surveying the construction progress across all 5 lots. "So what happens now? Do you actually plan to live here, surrounded by the physical manifestation of your revenge?" "Not revenge," I corrected automatically. "Consequences." "Semantics," she smiled. "But the question stands." I looked across at 1420 Willow Creek Drive, now bearing a "for sale" sign at the edge of the property. Daniel had relocated to a downtown apartment, according to Elise's sources. Natalie had moved back to her previous residence. The dream home purchased with stolen funds stood empty, surrounded by the physical evidence of actions having consequences. Yes, I decided, I'm going to live here, not to gloat or to dwell on the past, but because I paid for these properties. I designed these houses. In fighting for what was rightfully mine, I created something that belongs entirely to me. Rachel nodded, understanding. "And the other structures? The ones specifically designed to diminish 1420 Willow Creek?" I studied the guest house and art studio, the tennis court and community pavilion, each taking shape according to plans created, in anger and determination. I think some redesigns might be appropriate. Now that Daniel's selling the property, the new owners shouldn't be punished for his actions. The realization felt like release, that my need for justice had been satisfied, and it was time to move forward rather than remaining tethered to the past through structures designed for retribution. "A new chapter," Rachel suggested. "Exactly. One built on my terms, with foundations I laid myself." As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the construction sites, I felt the weight of the past months begin to lift. The divorce was finalized. The properties were secured. The financial settlement was completed. What had begun as a devastating betrayal had transformed into an unexpected opportunity to rebuild not just a home, but a life defined by my own choices, rather than the consequences of someone else's deception. The aftermath had brought clarity. The consequences had brought closure. And now, watching my vision take physical form around me, I was ready for whatever came next. 1 year later, I stood on the terrace of my completed home on Lot 18, watching the sunset paint the valley in hues of gold and amber. The view was spectacular, exactly as the property listings had promised, though I appreciated it in a way the original developers never could have anticipated. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "Happy housewarming day. Coming over with champagne. The Harrises want to know if they can join too." I smiled, texting back my approval. In the months since construction had completed, I'd developed genuine friendships with several neighbors, particularly the Harrises from 1418. Their initial curiosity about the unusual construction circumstances had evolved into warm camaraderie as they watched my vision for the properties transform. The redesigns had been extensive. After Daniel sold 1420 Willow Creek Drive to a young tech entrepreneur named Michael Lynn, I'd approached the new owner with an offer to modify the structures on the surrounding lots. Instead of buildings positioned to diminish his property, I proposed complementary designs that would enhance the entire neighborhood. Michael, unencumbered by the property's complicated history, had been enthusiastic about the collaboration. The guest house on Lot 17 was repositioned to frame rather than block the western views, creating a harmonious sightline that both properties could enjoy. The art studio on Lot 19 became a shared creative space where neighborhood children now took weekend classes. The tennis court remained, but with modified lighting that illuminated only the playing surface. The community pavilion was redesigned as an elegant gathering space that hosted monthly neighborhood events. What had begun as structures designed for retribution had evolved into amenities that built community. The irony wasn't lost on me. The doorbell chimed, interrupting my reflection. Rachel arrived with champagne as promised, the Harrises following shortly after with a housewarming gift, a beautiful landscape painting of the valley view. "It's perfect," I said, hanging it immediately in the entryway. "Thank you both." "We should be thanking you," Mrs. Harris insisted. "Property values throughout Oakwood Hills have increased 15% since you completed your projects. The development finally feels like a neighborhood instead of just a collection of expensive houses." We moved to the terrace with champagne, flutes, toasting the sunset and the culmination of a journey none of us could have predicted a year earlier. "Have you heard anything about Daniel?" Mrs. Harris asked, her tone carefully neutral. "He's in Seattle now," Rachel answered when I hesitated. "Took a position with a smaller firm after his partnership in Denver became complicated." Complicated was an understatement. Once the story of his financial misconduct became known in professional circles, his standing had diminished considerably. Not enough to end his career. Men like Daniel always landed on their feet, but enough to necessitate a fresh start elsewhere. And that woman, Natalie? Whatever happened with her? "She's actually doing quite well," I said, surprising myself with the genuine lack of animosity I felt. "She reached out a few months ago, believe it or not. She started her own real estate firm specializing in ethical investment properties." Mrs. Harris raised an eyebrow. "Well, I suppose some good lessons came from all of this." "More than I expected," I acknowledged. After my guests departed, I walked the perimeter of my property in the gathering twilight. My financial situation, once precarious from the massive investment in these properties, had stabilized. The redesigned guest house and art studio had been featured in an architectural magazine, bringing custom design projects to Vivian that she shared with me as a consultant. The tennis court and pavilion, now used for community events, generated modest income through membership fees that covered maintenance costs. What had begun as an emotionally driven act of consequence had evolved into a sustainable investment, both financially and personally. My phone rang as I completed my evening circuit. "Elise." "Just checking in on your housewarming," she said warmly. "How does it feel to be officially settled?" "Surprisingly peaceful," I admitted. "I thought living here might keep me connected to everything that happened with Daniel, but it's become something entirely different." "That's the definition of healing," she observed. "When places or objects associated with pain transform into something new." "Speaking of transformations, I received an interesting offer today," I said, moving back to my terrace to watch the final moments of sunset. "Thomas Pinnacle wants to discuss a partnership. Apparently, the work we've done integrating these properties has attracted attention from sustainable development investors. Are you considering it?" "I am. The initial concept involves creating community-centered luxury developments, high-end properties designed around shared spaces and amenities that foster actual neighborhood connections." Elise laughed softly. From revenge construction to pioneering a new development philosophy. Only you could make that pivot, Samantha. After ending the call, I sat in the growing darkness, lights from neighboring homes casting warm glows across the hillside. In the year since my divorce had finalized, I'd moved through stages of healing I hadn't anticipated. The anger that had fueled my initial plans had burned away, leaving clarity about what truly mattered to me: creation rather than destruction, connection rather than isolation. I'd discovered unexpected strengths through adversity. Financial acumen I'd previously channeled only into my corporate law practice now found expression in property development and investment. Design sensibilities I'd never explored flourished in collaboration with Vivian and other creative professionals. Leadership abilities previously confined to managing legal teams expanded into community building among neighbors who'd initially viewed me with suspicion. The following morning, I met Thomas Pinnacle at his office to discuss the partnership proposal. The man who had once been eager to sell me lots to alleviate his company's cash flow problems now sought my input on reimagining luxury developments. Your work at Oakwood Hills has become something of a case study, he explained, spreading concept drawings across the conference table. The integration of private luxury with genuine community spaces defies conventional development wisdom, yet the market response has been overwhelmingly positive. People with resources still crave connection, I observed. Perhaps especially those people. Exactly. And you've demonstrated it can be achieved without sacrificing exclusivity or investment value. He slid a formal proposal across the table. We'd like you to consult on 3 new developments, with potential for equity partnership if the initial projects succeed. The opportunity represented far more than financial potential. It offered a chance to transform my experience, even the painful parts, into something constructive. To create spaces where people could establish authentic community rather than just displays of wealth. To use my understanding of human nature, both its darker and nobler aspects, to design environments that encourage the latter. I studied the proposal carefully. I'm interested, but with conditions. Sustainability would need to be central to the designs, not just an afterthought. And I'd want real input on community space integration, not just surface-level amenities. Thomas nodded, unsurprised. We anticipated those requirements. That's precisely why we want you involved. 2 months later, ground broke on the first project, a hillside development called Horizon Point that incorporated many of the principles I'd discovered through my Oakwood Hills experience. At the groundbreaking ceremony, surrounded by investors and county officials, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had led me there. The betrayal that had once defined my days had receded into a chapter of my past rather than the defining story of my life. The 5 properties that began as instruments of consequence had evolved into the foundation of a new career and community. The financial devastation I'd feared had transformed into unexpected prosperity. As I drove home that evening to Oakwood Hills, I noticed a moving truck outside Michael's house, formerly 1420 Willow Creek Drive, though he'd changed the name to Aspen View. He waved as I passed, jogging over to my car. Perfect timing, he said. We're hosting a small gathering this weekend to celebrate the completion of the joint landscaping project between our properties. Would you join us? The invitation to celebrate in the home that Daniel had purchased with our stolen savings would have been unthinkable a year ago. Now it felt like the closing of a circle, the final integration of past pain into present peace. I'd be delighted, I replied. Later that night, I sat on my terrace beneath a canopy of stars, considering how thoroughly life could change in ways impossible to predict. My grandmother's wisdom echoed in my memories. A smart woman always has resources of her own. She'd meant financial resources, certainly, but I now recognize the deeper truth in her words. The most valuable resources weren't monetary at all, but internal: resilience, clarity, determination, and the capacity for growth, even through betrayal. Daniel had drained our savings for his girlfriend's house, but my hidden resources, both financial and personal, had allowed me to purchase the entire block. What he'd intended as an ending had become, against all expectations, a beginning. The houses around me stood as testimony to that transformation. Structures initially designed for retribution, now repurposed for connection. The community gathering spaces once meant to eliminate privacy now fostered genuine relationships. The properties purchased in anger now generated opportunities born of vision rather than vengeance. As I watched the neighborhood lights glow warmly against the night, I felt gratitude for the journey, not despite its painful beginnings, but because of them. Without Daniel's betrayal, I might never have discovered the strength, creativity, and purpose that now defined my life. Without the crisis that had shattered my marriage, I might never have built something uniquely mine. The moon rose over Oakwood Hills, illuminating paths between properties that once stood as adversaries, but now complemented each other in harmonious design. In that silvery light, I could see the physical manifestation of my internal journey, from devastation to determination, from consequence to creation, from retribution to renewal. The transformation was complete. Not because the past had been erased or forgotten, but because it had been integrated into a present rich with possibility, and a future limited only by imagination, rather than defined by someone else's betrayal. And in that integration lay the most powerful consequence of all, the discovery that the strongest foundations aren't built on revenge, but on the freedom that comes from creating a life entirely your own. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.